Um, I know. I should dress up a little more. Good evening, city officials, as well as brothers and sisters in Christ. It's an honor for me to be here. Thank you for the calling us and just allowing me to come here to start your meeting with short words and a prayer. And I think I've been in meetings like this, and a lot of times they can go long. And parts of our hearts are like, let it end quickly so we can go back home to our families. So I want to just read a few scripture verses, and I would like to pray for you guys, and your meeting can begin. This is from the book of Matthew, chapter 18, verse 18 to 20. Truly I tell you, this is our Lord Jesus Christ speaking, truly I tell you, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Again, truly I tell you that if two of you on earth agree about anything they ask for, it will be done for them by my Father in heaven. For where two or three gather in my name, there I am with them. I pray that there will be more than two or three that are in agreement in today's meeting. I pray that that all of us, all of you in Prospect Heights are of one heart, and of one heart serving the people, serving this wonderful town and city, and that I ask for God's special blessing upon all of you, wisdom and unity, as well as swift resolutions to whatever you guys are talking about, and also especially, I agree. I think as a basketball fan, I'm also in shock, but not just as a basketball fan, but as another human being. A tragic loss of life that had so much more potential to do so much good for other people. So I charge all of us that let's remember Kobe Bryant, but let's remember the hard work and dedication that he always wanted for everything, every facet of life. And I charge all of you gathered here today, that to work hard and to work hard together, because we cannot do this alone. So with that, would you join me in a short word of prayer? And let me pray for all of us. Let's pray. Gracious and loving God, Lord, Lord, we come to you as humble servants. Lord, we come to you as humble leaders. Lord, we come to you in this privileged but responsible, heavy position. And Lord, in today's meeting, in today's gathering, Lord, we ask that you would be here, present with them, with us. As all the things that are up for discussion, all the things that will be decided, all the things that will need more time to be decided, Lord, we ask that through it all, that it will be your will that is done, that it will be for your people, and that everyone gathered here, as well as everyone that is in the city, that is in this world, would find joy, find a little peace, find a little rest and comfort that we all so desperately need. Lord, we thank you. I thank you. And I pray that this meeting will go swiftly, and all of it would be for your glory. Lord, I thank you. And in Jesus' name, we all pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, Wendy, do you want to get things started?
Okay, today is January 27, 2020. Time is almost 6:45 p.m., and this is the regular City Council meeting of the Mayor and City Council of the City of Prospect Heights in the Council Chambers, Prospect Heights City Hall, 8 North Elmhurst Road, Prospect Heights, Illinois. Mayor Nicholas J. Helmer presiding. The meeting will be recorded and televised on the following cable channels: Comcast and WOW Channel 17 and AT&T UVerse Channel 99. Attendees who wish to speak on agenda or non-agenda items may fill out a request to speak form and submit to the city clerk, during which meeting it is anticipated there will be discussion and consideration of, and if so, determine action upon the matters contained in our agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. We need to decide who's here. And first, we'll introduce the aldermen for a quorum call. We have 5 aldermen, and quorum required is 3. So let's have the quorum call, please.
Alderman Morgan Adams.
Here.
Alderman Cameron.
Here.
Alderman Quinn.
Here.
Alderman Ludvison.
Here.
Alderman Dolick.
Here.
We have 5 aldermen here, it constitutes a quorum, and we can move on to the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Deputy Chief of the Police Department, Mark Poulier. Thank you, Chief. All right, Joe, you want to go ahead with the approval of minutes for first?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have first item of consideration is the approval of the minutes of the January 13th regular city council workshop minutes. And we also have noted the executive session minutes. Are there any changes or corrections? And if not, we will entertain a motion for approval.
Motion to approve as
Sec-
presented.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Roll call, please.
Alderman Cameron.
Aye.
Alderman Quinn.
Aye.
Alderman Morgan Adams.
Aye.
Alderman Dolick.
Aye.
Alderman Ludvison.
Which brings us to item 6 on the agenda, presentations. And first up is the Police Volunteer Service Awards. Chief?
All right, tonight we have several of our police volunteers here. We're going to recognize them tonight for their time, commitment, and participation in our community policing programs. Community policing programs are a great way for our volunteers. They give back to the community. They assist us throughout the police department with their man hours and to promote positive community relations. Some of the programs they volunteer are traffic control at some of our special events, manning our police desks, manning our police booths, and they also some of them go out on citizen patrol. And without their help, a lot of these community programs we wouldn't be able to do due to the manpower, the hours, the money, which Lara will talk about in a little bit about how much time and commitment they've committed to the community here. So we appreciate all their help. So I'm going to turn it over to Lara Batten, our police volunteer. She's going to say a few things, and we're going to have them come up here and get their awards for helping us out throughout this past year.
Right. Mayor Helmer, members of the Prospect Heights City Council, department heads, and residents. I am proud this evening to present our volunteers with the Outstanding Police Volunteer Awards for their hard work and dedication to this city and their police department. I would like to ask the volunteers to stand and congregate over by the door while I say a few words. I will then call the volunteers one by one, and you will be presented your award by Chief Salaki and Deputy Chief Pourlier. After you receive your award, please line up along the front of the council until all awards are handed out. The volunteer program was established over 5 years ago. Originally, the volunteers were utilized to help the police department run the police lobby. The program has since expanded to reach its running the program has since expanded its reach to running different programs, assisting with special events, and helping in large-scale police response and citizens patrol. The program was created to bridge the gap between community and residents. It creates a way to allow residents to take ownership of their city and help direct how policing is done in the city of Prospect Heights. Every year since inception, we have continued to grow and expect the same in coming years, and with anticipation of new exciting endeavors. The following list is a list of programs and activities that volunteers participated in during 2019. We did the Dunkin' Donuts Cop on a Rooftop, Prospect Heights Community Day, Rolling Meadows Law Enforcement Exhibit, Special Olympics Law Enforcement Torch Run, our Summer Youth Outreach Trips, Prospect Heights Block Party, the Lutheran Church Rummage Sale, Rock the Runway, the Prospect Heights 4th of July Parade, the Long Grove Special Olympics Car Show, National Night Out, the Community Paper Shredding Event, Prospect Heights Fire District Open House, the Girls Club Outings, Halloween Patrol, the Thanksgiving Food Drive, our Rapid Deployment Training, Prospect Heights Holiday Tree Lighting, holiday gift wrapping, our Citizens Patrol, several front desk duties that we have, as well as scheduling and coordinating all these different events. In 2019, we grew from 15 volunteers to 26, and in 2019 alone, the volunteers have put in over 1,100 volunteer hours, saving over $35,000 in costs to the city. With that being said, we would like to thank our volunteers for their dedication to the Prospect Heights Police Department and the city. As I call your name, please step forward and accept your award. Cindy Biasi, Matt Dolick, Barb Donahue, Jonas Dornzeifer, Paul Fisher, Alyssa Furlan, Peter Gamarello, Frank Gilbert, Bree Higgins, Joanna Hoffman, Cindy Heitink, Marcia Gendreas, Tim Klinger, Carmen Marchetti, Bob Massachesi, Pat Massachesi, Suzette Massachesi, Laura Messer, Angela Petrados, Caitlin Roscoe, Karen Schulteis, and John Warzeka. Again, thank you for all you've done for our department and our community. Yeah,
Can we go upstairs and get a picture?
yeah.
Really good picture with all of them.
Where is Tim's presentation? Is it on there?
Well, he's part of it. It's C. It's Willie.
Right, Nick?
Oh, no, I'm sorry, Tom. Yeah. Where's it at?
Oh, okay. Here it is, yeah.
I'm sorry.
I thought it was
I thought you
about-
said Tim.
Tim, I did say
Yeah,
that.
that's all right. Mr. Mayor, item 6B is the presentation of the Natural Resources Commission Work Plan for Hillcrest Lake. This follows, really, I think about 3-4 years ago, we had an issue with the aquatic weed growth on Hillcrest Lake. It was Elodia, and at that time, the city contracted with a firm, an environmental engineering firm, Hay, H-E-Y, and they came out and took an analysis of the lake, and they took a number of items that they recommended for actions for the preservation of the lake. That is as a part of the Natural Resources Commission work plan, which they're going to present for the tonight's meeting. And the action that we are asking for council after their review is for acceptance of the work plan or any amendment to it. So with that, it's the NRC team of Agnes and Dana.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dana Sievertson. I'm one of the commissioners. This is Agnes, our chairperson and founder of the commission, co-founder. We'd like to say good evening to Mayor Helmer, the alderman, and members of the city council. Mayor has asked us to truncate this, so we're going to do our best here to make this very quick.
But I noticed the clock hadn't started yet, so.
Okay, good. Let's see. Okay, so basically, we're here tonight. to present work that we'd like to do at the, as part of the 2016 plan that we put in place to do work throughout the entire watershed to stabilize the watershed and to continue to prevent things from going any further than they have. This is part of the plan that we had, that we submitted in 2016. And we're looking to just give you a brief overview of this and then hopefully have City Council proceed with approval. Real short, the main problems is defined by the Hay report with shoreline erosion, high nutrient loads, excessive aquatic growth, large goose population, shallow water depth, and invasive plant species. Recommendations we made for implementation was removal of the turf grass at the shorelines, revegetation of the shoreline with native plants, which is essentially creating riparian buffers, to reduce the goose populations, that's a byproduct of doing that, remove the invasives, community outreach and education, and then to retain, detain, and filter the stormwater coming in and schedule burns and mowing. Over the course of this winter, starting with the next workday, we'd like to begin the removal phase of the invasive plants that are there, or the invasive guys that are causing part of the problem. This would consist of removing invasives in the northwest corner of the slough, the south portion of the lake, and in random concentrations around the perimeter. Both the Hay report and our implementation plan are on our website, and it can be downloaded from that address there. So I just wanted to take a brief look back at what we started with in 2014. So I don't know if anybody even remembers this. This was Seven Hillside. And if you were standing on that road anywhere around the slough, you could not see the water. So this next shot is, this is across from where I used to live. That hole that's punched in that canopy was probably 40 feet in. This represents working every single night, 4 hours a night for a month to just penetrate that and make that little bit of difference. Here's looking towards 9 Hillside, and then a few before and afters. And then Agnes will tell you a little bit about buckthorn.
Just a little bit, and I'm sure everybody already knows that buckthorn is a very bad invasive plant species, and one of the reasons is that it has no natural predators. So it was brought over from Europe, from England, and as such, the predators that exist there did not come over with it, and so it has actually mutated to be able to prevent any other growth from around it. One thing that scientists have recently found is that it emits a chemical called emodin, which prevents plants from growing around it, but it also kills up to 50% of amphibian embryos. So if you have a wetland with buckthorn around it, you have many less frogs and toads and all sorts of really important creatures. One of the things it does when it doesn't prevent any plant growth is it just creates this black earth underneath. So if you've ever looked into one of these thickets, it's just black earth, and you can imagine how the water just erodes when it rains, and it just takes the earth with it. So it's a very significant source of erosion. It's a very nasty plant. There's other invasives that we have around the area, in less, not as much, but there's an invasive burning bush, high bush cranberry, and honeysuckle are the other ones. So in this first phase, we would just be removing most of this invasive buckthorn.
Okay, this is an excerpt from this Hay report. It shows you the areas of erosion. And it's very hard to see, but there's listed areas of severe erosion, substantial erosion, significant erosion. And most of those areas are on the lake and on that northwest corner of the slough. So what we've looked to do after the removal of invasives, we begin to repopulate those areas with the native plugs and with native seed. We would take great care that in the sight lines of the residents, we would do shorter species so as not to obscure the views. In between the areas of the sight lines, we would use taller plants. I'd like to point out that top picture there, that's a picture of an island that in 1973 used to be in the lake. It's now at the bottom of the lake.
Eroded.
And eroded away. So here's some more pictures of erosion. This is the northwest corner of the slough. I mean, you can see there's substantial erosion here, and that's pretty much the condition in all of the eroded areas. There are some recent photographs that hydrant is now about 4.5 feet off of the edge of the water. All along the shoreline, you see these invasive things, and I'll show you some more photos. This is the culvert that is an inlet, and it's where the cormorant tree is. That tree is pretty much undermined and will eventually fall down. Here's more of the substantial erosion. Part of the reason for this erosion is with that northwest, if you've got a wind that's blowing from the south and the west, it's moving that water quite rapidly across the lake, so that wave action is constantly pounding into that, and with no roots to hold it, it makes it really difficult.
And just quickly, briefly.
So briefly, here's, you all have this in your handouts. This is an overview of the area, and so it starts in the upper right-hand corner there with number 1, comes around to area 14. 8 and 9 refer to the northwest corner of the slough. So we'll just run through the pictures. This is Owen Court. We have no intention of doing anything there because that's part of the MWRD, and that will be more than likely completely destroyed. This is area 2, area 3, area 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 8 and 9 are the northwest corner of the slough, so this is looking towards Wheeling Road. This is looking back towards Elmhurst. Areas 9, 10, 11, 12. Now, area 13, there's some confusion there as to what's actually going to be done. Public Works went out and put out stakes for us to help try to define that. And what I want to do is give you this map from Cook County. So those stakes represent that X in the lower corner there. And that defines a buffer zone that was the planned area for Owen Street to come through. So that remains an easement. Nothing would be done there unless the city asked us to do that. So everything would be west of that stake going to the west. And then finally, another view at area 14.
Just really briefly, I wanted to reiterate why it's important, why native plants are so important. And you can see they're really deep root structures. So on the very left-hand side, we have turf grass. And they have very, very, very short roots that don't really absorb water. They don't stabilize the soil. And you look at native plants, they can go down. They have fibrous, rhizomatous roots that just really hold the soil in place. And if you go to the next slide, you can compare that to, you can see the turf grass right there. It's okay. I'll take it. Okay, so you can see the turf grass, and you can see how very, very short those roots are. This is one of my favorite pictures. It's from National Geographic. This is Indian grass, and you can see how deep those roots are. So you can imagine how these plants can really hold the soil much, much better
There's
than...
actually more biomass underneath the ground in most
Right.
cases than there is above. So it forms just, it's like, think of it as almost like a hair structure of rebar to reinforce the soil.
The other really important thing is that native plants also serve as phytoremediators. So they actually they filter everything coming into the water. So you have all your fertilizers and your salt, and so they take all of those harmful pollutants and they prevent that from coming into the slough. And I'll just recall one thing that my mom told me this summer. She said, you know, your dad and I are going out to put down fertilizer before it rains. You know, get it out there before it rains. Really bad idea, because all of that just washes right in. And we know that aquatic plants like fertilizer too. So then all of a sudden you have a flush of green in the water. So these, you know, if you replace that turf grass with these really important native plants, you can really filter everything coming in and have better water quality as well.
Okay,
For all the
so,
wildlife, everybody.
we have, this is an area of the lake here that we've photoshopped, just to give you a rough idea of what it could look like with native plants that would perform that stabilization. There's no plan at this point. If you see the water lilies in this in this photograph, there's no plan at this point to put any kind of aquatics in there, but it would be a really good idea to eventually do that because it absorbs that wave action. Okay, here's a couple more before and afters with Photoshop. You can see that would be the northwest corner up there on the left corner, and just another view of the lake. The plan would also permit paths from each of the residents directly down to the water, and then possibly a connecting path that could meander through all those growths. Here's an idea of some of the plants. And of course, this is a slough, so this is part of the restoration work at the slough, and we managed to really curtail the erosion over there. Blue flag iris, bulrush, and lots of warrior sedges. So that's basically it. So I don't know how much time the mayor's going to give us to answer questions, but we'd certainly like to. I'd also like
Well,
to offer if any residents would like to talk to us in depth about this,
all right.
just send us an email at info.com. We'd love to, we'd meet you out there. We'll do whatever you want, walk through and talk to you on site. And so if that helps, great.
Dana, I've seen many of your volunteers come out, whether it's rain or snow or sleet or whatever it is. One time I was out there were 40 people out there. So congratulations on bringing in people that care about what's happening at the slough and the lake. But what are you asking for?
Well, at this point, the erosion, I mean, the erosion is really substantial. It's significant. And there are parts there that if something isn't done relatively soon, that water is actually going to be touching the road.
But briefly, I mean, permission to remove invasive buckthorn, invasive plants from around those areas, and to plant native plugs at the shoreline to prevent further erosion and filter the water.
But in this winter phase, it would just be removing
Right.
All right, have you submitted a plan as to what
Yes.
happens from now on, or what you'd like to have happen? It's always a question about
Yeah,
of
in the
money, you know.
2016 plan, it's clearly laid out in the 2016 plan on our website.
All right, let's go for questions, if any. You're on the agenda, so you get a little leeway on
Okay.
time. I mean, your names are on the agenda. Anyone for the NRC? Yes. Who's raising their hand?
I just have a question. So
Is
the
that you?
removal,
I'm sorry. Ms. Quinn, go ahead.
thank you. The removal of buckthorn, that's already in the plan. And you have how many volunteers that are going to participate in the removal of that?
Well, however many show up, usually we have anywhere between 10 to 20 volunteers during a workday.
Okay. And then my other question is, you mentioned that you were willing to talk to the residents who live there. So have you guys engaged the people who live around the slough and the lake so they've contributed to the plan? Is that right?
So I believe that letters went out to the residents around the lake as well.
I mean, we tried to talk to as many people as
Yeah,
possible,
we're
and,
always-
we always welcome a conversation. Have we talked to a lot of people over there? No, I don't think that there's been a lot of interaction there. We would certainly welcome it.
And one last question. So I know you guys had a plan for the slough, and has the lake always been a part of NRC's plan that,
Yes,
for restoration?
go ahead.
Well, I mean, we weren't really sure what was going to happen with the Willow Road and raising and all of these things, so we didn't really want to press
I
on
mean, there's
the-
two reasons why we haven't done anything there. First of all, it's because, the pending MWRD road elevation project and what that was going to actually look like. But probably more importantly, we were managing 4 or 5 other sites, and they're all in sort of a state of infancy. And in order to keep from being spread too thin, we got those things to a level of maturity where we could start to deviate our time and concentrate on something else. So we're at that point right now. We'd like to continue on to do this.
All right, and who are you working with at the city?
We work with Mark, we work with Dan, we work with Peter and Joe. We work with anybody who will work with us.
Anybody that shows up, too.
Yeah,
Well, thank you very much.
okay, thank you. Yes.
Yes, Alderman Wendy Morgan Adams. So you're talking about over the course of the winter, this winter, you would begin the invasive removal phase.
Mm-hmm.
How long do you think it will take to make an impact in terms of the erosion? Any idea?
Well, no, go ahead.
I think it's really limited by time and resources. So, I mean, it could take a year or two. It could take, I mean, for the work to be done, it could take longer than that.
And are you going to present a budget of what funds you need to be able to continue working on this project?
That's all in our budget proposal, both to Park District and to City Council already.
Okay.
It's included.
It's just it's another phase of the workload, so.
Okay, great.
I think in terms of probably more directly, to remove the invasives, and it's not sure whether we remove all of them at this point. We would go out there and evaluate. One of the things we look for is frozen, if the lake is frozen, then we can actually get on the ice and work from that side as opposed to trying to go down a hill. So it makes it a little bit easier. We'd probably look for that, so whenever those conditions were right, we would go take care of that day and do as much as possible, and then come back as we can, work the other
Yeah,
areas.
very slowly. It would take a long time.
Just like we've done with the riparian buffers from the Isaac Walton sign going down hillside to the north. We've done that in phases so that it doesn't look bombed out, all in mass. So we've progressed those in chunks as we've gone down. Some of them are now 4 years old, some are 3 years old, some are 2 years old, but we're progressing, and the plan is still to do the entire thing so that we have a big giant riparian buffer there to absorb all this stuff that's going in that's causing all the problems in the watershed.
All right, thank you. Let's hold it there. I've been remiss. We have other people on the dais here, and they should be
Mr. Mayor?
introduced.
I have a question.
I got a couple questions.
Oh,
Just real quick, when you talk about invasives, I agree with you with buckthorn. Nobody likes buckthorn. Nobody's going to disagree with that removal. Where we might disagree is what you call native and what somebody else calls, a tree. And I would bet that 99% of trees planted in Prosper Heights, when people go out and buy them, are non-native.
Correct.
But they may not
So-
be invasive necessarily.
Right, there's a difference.
Right, but I mean, the idea of removing, I'm all in favor of removing buckthorn, but there are a lot of trees around there that you would say, it's not native, you should take it down, and it might be a 30, 40-foot high tree with a, 18-inch base.
We're not looking to do that.
Even if it is Siberian elm, and even if it is a tree of heaven,
Well, the tree of heaven is the.
I know those are ugly trees.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
those
the
are really
bad one.
invasive.
I don't know if there's actually that many tree of heaven.
Because there's a lot of trees there, I would hate to see them come down just because.
No, we would definitely leave any large diameter trunks and any standing dead trees too, because that's really great for habitat. So if there's like a little tiny tree of heaven that's this tall and it's mixed in with buckthorn, then why not just take it out? It's invasive. But if there's a very large diameter, we wouldn't take any of the larger trees down at all.
The other thing too is we went through a long process of that project for the road. The neighbors were very clear that they like to look out their window, look into the water, and have it be the way it is. They did not want the road raised because they felt that was going to be an impediment to their view, to their use, to what it was, what they moved there for. And through what you're showing there, it looks like you're going to be planting that
Yeah,
is
we
actually
would
going
plan
to
to
be.
restabilize that, but in those areas, much like we've done on Hillside Avenue, where there's a resident.
Right, but Hillside never had, this has cut grass all the way around.
Right, I know, that's the
And
problem.
I know that's not what you like, but that's, those people, other people there do that. So it was a very, very intense meeting, that many of them that we had about this and what the people wanted to remain. So I would think that we would need to make sure that, everybody there is in favor of this, because.
Yeah,
Yeah, and we can start slowly with the neighbors that we know are really in favor of this as well. And then.
As far as the buckthorn, you could start tomorrow, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor, I have a question. Alderman Cameron.
yes, ma'am.
You said that you did a budget in 2016 for, fixing all this. We weren't here. Me and Kathy were not here.
no, it wasn't a budget, it was a plan.
It was a plan, sorry.
It was a plan.
It was a plan. Do you have a copy of that?
It's on our website. If you go to
We can send
PHNRC, we'll send it to you.
Okay.
But if you go to
Email it.
PHNRC and then go to the presentations page, there's a corner over in a link in the
We'll
upper
send it.
right-hand corner that says presentation.
We'll email it to everybody that.
All right, anyone else?
Yeah, I had one last quick
Yes, sir.
question, and actually perhaps Mark Roscoe can address this as well. Is it clear to the NRC exactly where property lines are? Because I've heard that some properties kind of extend to the lake. Some of that is Prospect Heights property that you would be working on. Is it clear exactly where those property lines are so that you're not working on?
Yeah, I
someone
think
else's
there's only
property?
one property that sort of enters into that question, and that is like, I think, 300 Willow Road. But that's clearly marked out, and there's nothing that would happen there. All the rest of it, my understanding is, and Mark can correct me if I'm wrong, but all the rest of that is public, is a city-owned land all the way around the lake.
Okay.
We went over it with the maps.
There are residents that have right along that spot where the lots we're talking about, the two vacant lands. And then, as you showed on your map, that right-of-way, which, as we talked from the beginning, was unless the neighbors on the east side of it were interested, that was just going to be left alone, just to keep continuity and not create any issues.
Right.
If residents anywhere else on the lake or the slough, I know there's a couple properties on the slough, or at least the one in the corner, if they want to join in on the plan that you have and appreciate it for what you want to do with it, that would be great. But we're not going to make anyone with private property on the lake or the slough change anything to that nature at this point. And that 66-foot buffer area is just, we'll let the resident work on that. As we had talked,
Right.
the land, Mr. Mayor, is where a street could have been when the city was designed or when that area was put in. The street wasn't there. So both property owners on each side would treat it like a corner yard. So we don't get involved with it. Down the road, there is a right-of-way there if something were to change, but in anyone's outlook in this room, there is nothing planned for anything down that strip, so.
Okay,
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.
Again, let's let the cameras and the people know who's sitting up here. Mike Ducharme, would you start? Identify yourself.
Michael Ducharme, Director of Finance.
Mark Roscoe, Director of Public Works.
Peter Falcone, Assistant Administrator. Dan Peterson, Director of Building and Development.
Joanna, are you next?
You're next.
We did the Alderman already, so.
Joanna Precision, City Clerk.
Joe Wade, City Administrator.
Kevin Carney, City Attorney.
Karen Schulteis, Deputy Clerk.
Jim Zalaki, Chief of Police.
Michelle Cameron, Ward 1, Alderman.
All right, I think there you are. He's always behind that mirror. You don't know where he's looking. But he's great. He's been here a lot longer than most of us. All right, Joe?
Mayor, the next item on the agenda is a presentation of the Willow Road Stormwater Management Project. This is the a proposed improvement of Willow Road, which is, people in this neighborhood know that floods quite frequently in stormwater events. For basically about the last year, the city's had an ad hoc Willow Road Committee that had meetings. We heard a lot of testimony from residents in the area. On this council, the Alderman Ludvigsen and Alderman Morgan Adams are on that committee. And tonight, it's a presentation. I don't know whoever would like to speak to the issue, or I'm on the committee as well, as to what the committee is recommending as far as a scope of work for this improvement project.
Well, Wendy, you were absent last time, so we need to hear from you this time.
Okay. So after conducting meetings and hearing testimony from Hillcrest Lake residents, we've made the following recommendations are being made. The Willow Road, consistent with the MWRD proposal, elevation of Willow Road would raised a maximum of 3.5 feet, and this anticipated work would take about 18 months. The Hillcrest owners have overwhelmingly expressed opposition to elevation of Hillcrest, and they had concerns over aesthetic view of the lake, construction disruption, changes to landscaping, other factors. So there's no change to Hillcrest. We're recommending no change to Hillcrest at all. Owen Street, the committee is recommending a 2.5 feet elevation increase. It's less than the 3.5 feet increase originally proposed. It provides overflow protection for an approximate 10-year storm event, meaning there's a 10% chance of water reaching the top of the road during any given year. And if the council approves the recommendation, an intergovernmental agreement among the city, MWRD, and Cook County Department of Transportation and Highways will be crafted and brought forward for council consideration, and the agreement will define the scope of work, agency responsibilities, and distribute costs. So that's our recommendations. Joe, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, let's hear from Alderman Ludwig.
Oh, I'm sorry.
He was there too.
She summarized it all. It's perfect. The plan is exactly as she stated.
All right.
I think the thing to point out, though, is that the reason that people didn't want Hillcrest was, like you had said, the aesthetics. So I think that's important to mesh with what the NRC is doing at the same time, because that was the main topic.
All right, Joe?
If I may add, we have a couple other points to add. First of all, also too, I want, for the council, and you, Mr. Mayor, Pat Glenn from Gawalt Hamilton Engineering is here tonight. So if there are any follow-up questions about this project, if anybody has any concerns or things that Pat might be able to address, this would be a good opportunity. Another point, we spent quite a bit of time during the meetings that we had also about the impact on the lake. And certainly the engineer from Globetrotters who did the initial design work repeatedly told us that this is not going to change the hydrology of the lake. But related to that, we also expressed to the MWRD concerns that were somewhat addressed tonight, and that's the overall health of the lake. Our records show that it's the sedimentation, it's filling in, which is leading to where there used to be more depth. So now, with the right weather conditions, the aquatic growth is showing. Basically, I think the lake is kind of converting to a marsh. So MWRD suggested to us that we contact the state, the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency, to see if there might be some assistance to that. And Pat Glenn had made contact with the IEPA, and certainly he can jump in, but I'll just try to summarize it very briefly. There is a possibility that the city could submit an application for a grant to IEPA for dredging. Now, earlier, about 4 years ago, when we looked at this, I think the dredging estimates were approximately $700,000, plus or minus. The IEPA grant, it's what's known as a 319 grant. It's primarily purposes for water quality. It's not so much concerned with aesthetics, but more really for things such as shoreline erosion, things like that. They were very frank with us. They told us that generally dredging applications do not fare well. You think about it, it's the competitive process for the entire state. And it competes against many of these shoreline erosion projects where I worked in a previous community where a stream that ran through the backyards, you had garages lost, concerns about property, things like that. This is not that situation. So they advised us that certainly the city can apply for it, but they're very, very frank that they see that there are other priorities for it. The other part of it, too, is if the city were successful, the grant is a 60-40 grant. So it's not like some of the other ones that we've done for streets or sidewalks that are 80-20. This is 60-40, so 40% would be the local community. I just wanted to address that because certainly over the past year, that's been something that has been of interest to the city and the residents.
All right, anything else? We're moving on.
The one item for this, if there are no questions, I think there are a couple of points from the audience.
Is it the road project?
Yes.
Okay. We can have, if Richard and Mary Solberg would like to make some comments? Yes, come on.
Come up and identify yourself and where you live.
All right. I'm Mary Solberg. I live on Owen Court. So.
Okay. And who else is with you?
Richard Solberg.
Thank you. I thought I recognized you.
I just wanted to say two things. I'm so happy that the road project seems to be taking shape. We live on Owen Court, so access to our house is blocked when, the road floods. When we moved in about 25 years ago, it was very occasional, once in 3 years sometimes, or once in a year. Now it's multiple times every year that we can't drive into Owen Court because the road is covered with water. And I don't know if anyone realizes how bad that can be for us, because what we do is park our cars on the outside of the flood. Then we have to walk from our home to our cars. And the grass is very wet and soggy and muddy and slippery. if we go out the Owen Court side. And if that's too wet, we have to cut through backyards to get to Hillcrest or Wheeling Road. So we like push through the bushes and walk through mud, and one route has a dog that barks very viciously when you walk through. And I wonder if the neighbors might get startled to see someone walking through. And sometimes it's storming or raining. So when my children were in high school, sometimes we just couldn't go to an evening event at high school because it was storming and we couldn't get out. So that's happening multiple times now every year. And it's, you know, of course I worry about our property values, and it's really a terrible situation for us when it happens. I do appreciate that the project is coming together, and I just hope so much that it will continue to raise Owen Street 2.5 feet. I also wanted to comment on the Natural Resource Commission. Is that right? National. I actually walk frequently around the lake and the slough, and I have for many years. And I kind of saw the project that they did along Hillside gradually taking place, cutting down and then planting, and it's so beautiful. I walk by and I can't help but say to my friend, wow, this looks so beautiful. It's so much better. It's so different. And, you know, we saw when they were cutting down and it was, you know, nothing, and then the gradual planting and the growing, and it's really very nice. And where I live along, I'm on Owen Court, and we walk through or drive through Owen Street. And what happens there is there are plants along the lake, and they, I think, kind of weedy, very weedy looking. They grow and they're thick and you can't see. And then periodically someone comes and mows it all down, and then it's just shorn. So, and I think that looks kind of awful. So I think that I would be very appreciative if we could have the natural plantings along the whole lake. There's another area, I think, that Catherine Husser planted some natural plantings and took out some, and that area is also very beautiful. So I know it's a very gradual process to start but to plant those native plants with the long roots, which I didn't know about until tonight, seems to me very, very worthwhile in the long run for the aesthetic as well as the health and protection. So thank you. That's all I have to say.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Do any of the council members have any questions for Pat as long as he's here? Any engineering questions?
It looks like he wants to say something.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to, I've been to the ad hoc meetings, all of them, and followed them closely and spoke at all of them, so I won't be long here, but there was one thing I was thinking about was the height to raise Owen Street. We went back and forth, like, with the numbers 3.5, 2.5, 1.5. 2.5, I would think would be acceptable, but I would think that you'd really have to know what reference point they're talking about when they say 2.5 feet. So is it 2.5 feet from the lowest sag in the road, or from the highest point at the intersection with Hillcrest, or what is the reference point? Because 2.5 feet by itself doesn't really tell you exactly what's going to happen. From where? 2.5 from where? And then will it level the road, or will it still, will it still like vary as it is now, but everything 2.5 feet higher? So can somebody clarify that?
No.
Pat?
Hold on, please. Sir, you see all these people here?
Yeah.
We didn't know you were going to bring this up. Can you come to City Hall, sit with our engineer, sit with our city administrator,
Okay.
and go through it?
Okay, well,
It's kind of, you know, you've been thinking about this a lot, and I appreciate that, because we need people to help us, but we've got to keep moving. And I
We just had one question, that was just,
Okay.
what does it reference, from what point? But, okay.
Thank you.
Can he, I mean,
Well,
obviously, you're on the clock. I mean, we're getting an invoice from you whether you talk or not, so if you can answer this question.
I'm Patrick Lenham, the city engineer. The brief answer to the question is it's a maximum of 2.5 feet from the lowest spot on the road, the north-south portion, and it effectively tapers to 0 near Hillcrest and then in the cul-de-sac of Owen Court. So it's 2.5 feet at the low spot, and then it progressively gets to be less as you work your way to either end of the court.
all right, as long as we
Thank you.
brought it up. Does that answer your question, sir? Okay, thank you. Joe?
We're going to ask for a motion on this for the acceptance of the committee's recommendation so that we can package this up to MWRD and get to work on an intergovernmental agreement and a work plan, scope of work.
All right, and who's entitled to make motions here? Anyone?
So moved?
Second?
We have a motion, we have a second. Does everyone know what we're voting on? You already described it, so you're good. Roll call.
Okay. Alderman Ludwigson.
Aye.
Alderman Quinn.
Aye.
Alderman Dolick.
Aye.
Alderman Morgan Adams.
Aye.
And Alderman Cameron.
Motion passes 5-0.
Aye.
Where'd that come from? Cameron, was that you?
No, that was me, Cameron. I had my thing off, so I
Oh.
want to make sure that
All right,
hears
thank
me out
you.
there.
Thank you very much. I thought we had someone in the ceiling. All right, what's next?
Mayor brings us to item 7, appointments, confirmations, and proclamations. And item A is the appointment of Thomas Heitink to the Police Pension Board.
I would like to make this appointment with your agreement. You received his resume twice, actually, once for the Cannabis Committee and now for the addition to the Police Pension Fund Board where we have a vacancy. Tom, are you here this evening? Why don't you stand up, say hello? I know you've said hello to the Alderman
Good evening, everyone.
before.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor.
They're an august group.
Any questions further? I thank you so much for the recommendation. I energetically would accept the appointment for this very important role. As I've been seeing today, there's a lot of people contributing to the community, which is wonderful. And again, I'd like to be able to contribute to the community by serving in this capacity.
All right, you'll have a tough assignment. You know, the state is trying to consolidate all the pensions and so on and so forth. So you'll do a good job. You've got the background. Questions for Mr. Heitink? Anyone? You've read his resume. He's spoken before. Let's get a roll call, please.
Alderman Cameron.
Aye.
Motion.
Oh, sorry.
Motion for approval. So moved.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second? Second, anyone?
Second. Oh, I can't. I moved.
All right,
Second?
second. Now we'll have a roll call.
Okay. Alderman Cameron.
Aye.
Alderman Ludwigson.
Aye.
Alderman Dolick.
Aye.
Alderman Quinn.
Aye.
Alderman Morgan Adams.
Aye.
Great. One thing I do want to say, I hope you still have some teenagers or children at home, because your wife is over at the police department. Now you'll be here at the Police Pension Fund.
I've got
Send
7
some more
grandkids that
people.
visit me every so often, so
Send
no
some-
kids at home.
Oh, all right, thank you.
All right, thank you again,
Thank
Mr.
you
Mayor.
very much.
Item B is a proclamation celebrating the 100th anniversary of the League of Women Voters.
All right, where's the proclamation?
I have it.
You're going to read it?
Yes, if I may.
All right, can we go ahead and do
Okay.
that?
All right. So we have the proclamation to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the League of Women Voters. Whereas on February 14th, 1920, the League of Women Voters League was formed at the Congress Hotel in Chicago, Illinois. Whereas the League was formed 6 months prior to, but in anticipation of ratification of the 19th Amendment, giving women the right to vote in the United States. Whereas the League was a political experiment designed to help 20 million women carry out their new responsibilities as voters by educating them about issues. Whereas from the beginning, the League determined that it would be nonpartisan, neither supporting nor opposing any political party or individual candidate. Whereas the League continues today as a nonpartisan political organization that encourages informed and active participation in government, works to increase understanding of major public policy issues, and influences public policy through education and advocacy. Whereas today, the League is composed of members in over 700 local, county, and state leagues in all 50 states, plus the District of Columbia, the Virgin Islands, and Hong Kong. Whereas among those state leagues is the League of Women Voters of Illinois, that was incorporated on March 22, 1920, and in turn is composed of over 40 local leagues with almost 4,000 members. Whereas members of the League first study and then take action on a broad range of issues after reaching consensus on positions. Whereas leagues of all levels, among other activities, register voters, educate voters by holding candidate forums and publishing voter guides, publish public policy research, and hold meetings on key issues. Whereas the League is a civic organization that has fought since 1920 to improve government and engage everyone in the decisions that impact their lives. Whereas the League will celebrate its 100th anniversary on February 14th, 2020. Now, therefore, City of Prospect Heights declares February 14th, 2020 as a date to celebrate the League of Women Voters and its vision of a democracy where every person has the desire, the right, the knowledge, and the confidence to participate.
What do we want, a motion to approve presenting this to the League of Women Voters?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second, we have a roll call.
Yes.
Are we?
Comments? Are there comments?
No, I was just saying it's a proclamation. It wasn't a, it's not a,
Right.
doesn't require a vote, but it doesn't matter.
Well, I want everybody in favor of it, so take a roll call.
Alderman Morgan Adams.
Aye.
Alderman Cameron.
Aye.
Alderman Quinn.
Aye.
Alderman Ludvigsen.
Aye.
Alderman Dolick.
Aye.
All right, so duly noted, the council approved the issue, and we can move on. What's next?
We have public comment on agenda matters. Many of these are related to the airport matter, if you want to place those with the airport, sir.
All right, so the airport report will come after, because that's the way the agenda is written. Public comment. Public comment regarding airport issues. If your name's not on here, then produce one person to speak, presuming that person represents all the people that are here from the airport or about the airport. Where are we? Mark?
Yes, that's me. Well, good evening. I'm Rob Mark. I'm chairman of the Executive Pilots Association Committee to save our Crosswind Runway 624. I've been in the aviation business for 40 years, business jet pilot, a flight instructor, an air traffic controller, and an industry journalist. But tonight, though, I'm here representing the 114 members of our association. And we hope when it comes time to vote on the airport's master plan tonight, you'll suggest some revisions and send it back. And in this case, tell them to strike the plan to close runway 624. Why? Well, because the airport's not telling you that closing this runway is going to create an even bigger safety problem than the one they want to fix. Now, I realize they don't believe that. They're absolutely 100% certain the plan's just fine. In fact, they're so sure of themselves that they're willing to bet our lives on it, except we're not. We've discovered that there are a number of issues, a number of inconsistencies in the plan, but of course the airport board and the executive director have never allowed us to speak to them, even though this is a publicly funded, public use airport. So I guess I wonder why that is. For instance, we analyzed some of the very same wind data the airport's paid engineers did, and using the same software, as a matter of fact, we came up with different conclusions. I wonder why. The airport says the safety hotspots near the runway 624 can only be eliminated if the runway is closed. Yet the FAA says that's not true. So why the differences? The airport says there will be public comments about the runway when the FAA completes its upcoming assessment. But what they forgot to mention to you is that no one's going to raise the issue of safety in those assessments. Now, last week, a Wheeling trustee asked the executive director a simple question. Have you ever asked the FAA in a letter if they thought removing the runway was going to issue some kind of, or create some kind of safety problem? I mean, and he hem-hawed a little bit and then finally said, well, actually, no, they never had, and that he didn't think even asking the FAA that kind of a question was such a good idea. So why not? The FAA traffic growth forecasts used in the master plan that decide how many hangars they're going to build on the airport are almost 4 years old. Forecasts are nice, but only if they hold up. Did you know that Pal Walker executives' traffic declined 15% alone in last year? And it fluctuated for a couple of years before that. Whereas at DuPage, traffic rose about 15% between 17 and 18, and it was up another 20% alone between 2018 and 2019. So I wonder if even a smidgen of reality has been added to any of these airport forecasts. Now, last week in Wheeling, the executive director and his paid engineer refuted many of the inconsistencies we mentioned, often giving the board information that was either not true or missing a few important facts. Now, I think they're hoping that none of you are going to be bright enough about airports to ask good questions. Unfortunately, we didn't have an opportunity to speak again after our 5 minutes, so we couldn't really follow up on any of that. Now, the vote in Wheeling last week wasn't unanimous at all. 2 trustees caught on quickly enough to realize that there were just too many unanswered questions about this runway closure for them to feel comfortable voting yes. So some of the trustees thought the only option they had, though, was to vote for the plan in favor of it and simply hope the FAA would intervene if any safety issues popped up. But there is another option. Ask the airport to remove the runway closure from the plan, at least until we've cleared up these inconsistencies. Why? Because it's the safest option. May not be the easiest, but it's the safest. So ask yourselves, if the airport folks are so sure of themselves, why is it they still refuse to listen to anything we have to say when we represent 2/3 of the aircraft based on that airport? They should be able to pretty easily take the wind out of our sails, I would have thought, if they're so good at this, don't you think? So tonight, I'm hoping that, personally, I actually think it's, let me rephrase that. Personally, I don't think it's confidence they're displaying. I think it's arrogance, except they're playing with our lives, not theirs. So we plead with you tonight to please show us, give us a chance to show you why closing the runway won't actually fix a safety problem, but it's going to create one that's even larger. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Are
5 minutes
my
is up.
friends going to be allowed to chat?
No.
And can I ask why
They're
not?
all going to say the same thing.
No, that's not true, Mr. Mayor.
I'd rather go to the airport presentation. We'll see how much time is left for more people for the same thing.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
But we will let you speak.
Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, sir.
Just a point of order, I don't want to listen to all of them either, but I think we have a choice, and we don't have a choice to do so. I mean, we can't just say that they're all going to say the same thing, don't let them talk. They have to be able to talk, and I think the city attorney will probably agree with that.
Well, we have discussed all this, and for the moment, they can come back. That's fine. But I want the airport layout plan. I don't know what you're talking about when I don't understand the plan myself.
So are you, Mayor, are you suggesting that we move public comment to after the airport presentation?
Yeah.
Okay.
Presentation. It's a presentation. You know, you're deprecating remarks about people that work very hard to do the very right things is very, very unfair. Yeah, let's have.
Mr. Mayor, I mean, believe me, I'm not telling you how I'm going to vote, but I like what the airport does, but just as a point of order, I don't want this to happen next time to something else that I might want people to talk about. So I think you have to listen to them. I don't think we have
I
a
will
choice.
listen to them
It's part of our-
after
no,
the
well, No,
airport
it's
gives their
discussion
report.
about items on the agenda, and that's to occur before the item happens.
Right, actually, we haven't heard the item on the agenda yet, so.
Exactly, this goes before that. They're supposed to speak beforehand, so they can make their point before the airport makes theirs. Second of all, if you're trying to win this argument that you want the airport to tell everybody how great it is, wouldn't you want the airport to have the last word anyway? I mean, it would make sense if I was trying to do what you were trying to do, I'd want them to speak last so they could convince us all and have no rebuttal, so.
I'm not sure what you're saying.
I'm saying that if your point is that you want the airport to go to convince them, because you want the airport to win this argument, let the people speak
Not
first.
at all, I didn't say that. I'm a
Right.
pilot, I use
What's
624 all the
What's the purpose of
time.
not letting them speak?
They can speak after we understand what.
We've
the-
never done
maybe-
this.
Maybe they've made some changes, you know, they've heard everything in Wheeling, maybe they've made some changes there. I want to hear from the airport manager, director, and they can come back up, I'll give them time.
Absolutely.
So just to be clear, Mayor, you're suggesting that the airport give its presentation and then public comment occur after the
Right,
presentation? Okay.
right, simple.
All right.
Mr. Jamie Abbott, can you take the podium, please? I presume you're giving the airport layout plan. Well, are you going to do it?
I'm going to present the guys that are doing it, if that was all right.
Oh, that's fine, because we still have Jim to talk about the airport too, so.
No, I was the one scheduled to do that.
The monthly report?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, Jim.
Jim's here as my support.
Okay, so you
Good
want
guy to have.
You want to come up with
Is it okay
the
if I do
monthly
the report now?
No, fine.
And then I'll introduce.
And then Jamie, and then back to the other people.
So Mayor Helmer, city staff, elected officials, residents and visitors, I'm here on behalf of Chicago Executive Airport, just to give you some brief update on what's happening at the airport, other than the airport layout plan, because there's a lot of good things happening, despite what, you would gather from the storm that's brewing. We are committed to general aviation, and I can point to one of our key initiatives that we've been working on. Aviation Academy has officially moved into their new classroom space in T Hangar 51. This is the collaborative education program between District 214 and Lewis University, where we're teaching high school students about aircraft mechanics. This new space includes a T hangar next door for hands-on training on actual aircraft, and we thank Dan and all of his team for their help getting this done. We're also working on plans for a more permanent location over in another building that we own. As this program expands, there are many more students that want to take this program than we have space for in this currently. Number two, the first round of our welcome letters sent out to residents who'd be included in the residential sound insulation program. As you know, we're one of the very few general aviation airports in the country to have this type of a sound insulation program, trying to be a good neighbor to our residents that live around the airport. Program manager Penny Merritt has already started receiving applications back from interested residents. The first round of homes that are going to receive this treatment in the initial phase will include 10 homes. Finally, the contractor for the demolition of Hangar 4 has been selected. Pre-demolition meeting was held last week at the airport. Assuming we get all the permits and so forth acquired, the demolition will happen in the next few weeks. And also both the Prospect Heights and the Wheeling Fire Department have been able to take advantage of the fact that this building is being demolished and will be conducting training in the building before it gets raised. So again, trying to be a good neighbor, despite what you hear, we're not the terrible people at the airport who are not listening to anybody. We do participate in a lot of community activities, including with our pilots. So I'd like to invite Jamie Abbott and Craig Loudon up from CMT to go ahead and go through this presentation.
Good, thank you. All right, identify yourselves, please.
Yes, sir. Good evening, Mayor Helmer. I'm Jamie Abbott, Executive Director of the airport. And I'm Craig Loudon with Crawford Murphy and Silly. I'm the project manager on the master plan.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having us tonight, Mayor and City Council. I want to start off by saying I want to assure you that we would never submit to you an unsafe plan, a plan which must also go to the FAA for approval. We at the airport are proud of our culture of safety. We've won safety awards. Safety is our core value, as I know it is for the pilots as well. We're also charged with taking a broad and comprehensive approach to airport planning. That means increasing safe operations on the ground, managing our limited resources, and assuring that we can meet the needs of the majority of current and future airport operations. You have put that trust in us as custodians of the airport, and I hope to show you tonight through this presentation that that's true. Thank you for allowing me to start with that. Okay, does this work here?
Yeah, there's a delay, so.
Awesome, thank you.
It's good.
Okay, I don't want to bore you tonight with a lot of this information because you've kind of been along with us in the process, at least most of you, at least for the last year and a half or so. So just to kind of give you a broad level overview to start off with, what is the master plan? We all kind of know at this point, but master plan is kind of the big level, high level plan that goes out 20 to 30 years. It predicts the needs and demands of the airport through an FAA forecasting method. It solicits input from the airport stakeholders. And there's some goals with the master plan. It's to comply with FAA requirements. It's to present preferred airport development layouts at the end. And it's to assure compatible land use development around the airport. So within the master plan, kind of a product of the master plan, is a very technical document called the Airport Layout Plan, which is before you tonight. It's prescribed by the FAA. It's guided by the master plan. So those kind of core values from the master plan formulate the airport layout plan, which is kind of the roadmap for the future. The master plan goes out about 10 years. The last master plan was done in 2009. And I'll kind of hit on that here in a minute. And it's the airport's planning tool that depicts both existing facilities and planned developments in the future. We are working within the current airport boundaries, the 4 roads of the airport. It shows the location of existing and proposed airport facilities and structures, hangars, taxiways, and so forth. And it shows the location of existing proposed non-aviation areas as well, like the industrial area and so forth. Okay, a little bit more history on the ALP and master plan specifically. The last master plan was completed in 1984. That was before the communities bought the airport in the late 80s. So the current master plan's about 35 years old, so it was due. The last ALP, which is the product you're approving tonight or considering tonight, was last completed in 2009, so it's about 10 years old. So we're right about that mark where it's due to be updated. Back in 2014, the airport board initiated the current master plan study, so we've been working on this for about 6 years. So about 6 years and $1.5 million later, about 30 plus technical professionals, airport engineers, planners, pilots, about 20 plus airport user meetings, 4 public open houses, stakeholder involvement group. I'll kind of cover that a little bit later, but the makeup of the stakeholder involvement group was local officials, federal officials, state officials, also representation from the airport business partners, the Piston pilots, the then SEPA president had a seat at the table, and community groups. Master plan is eligible eventually when we get it done for federal and state reimbursement up to 90%. And per the IGA, both municipalities approve the ALP before it gets submitted to the FAA. So last week we went before the village board and got it approved, and tonight we're before you. And then it goes to the FAA for review and approval. Just to highlight a few or a couple public meetings where we presented this current or the proposed airport layout plan to you. It's not changed from the presentation we made at the July 11th open house. And also we presented it at the joint workshop in September at Chevy Chase. So that's the same proposed airport layout plan that you've seen at both of those meetings. Nothing has changed. So what are some of the goals of the ALP? Well, it's to improve safety, maintaining our status as one of the safest GA airports in the country. We're proud of that. Hotspot mitigation, you'll hear that word hotspot, and you've probably heard it for a while. We'll kind of cover that. I'll show you some maps to show you exactly what a hotspot is. It's to develop the property within our existing boundaries. We've been tasked to develop the airport within the 4 major roads of the airport, and that's what you'll see tonight. And of course, it's maintaining excellent financial health. That's been the goal of the airport since we were purchased by the two communities. We're proud of the fact, and not a lot of airports can say this, that we're financially self-sufficient, meaning we generate enough money on the airport operations to cover our operations and also the capital expenditures as well. So no community funds go into the operation of the airport. Okay, I'm going to kind of turn it over to Craig here. It's a little small to see on the screen, but I want Craig to kind of give you an overview and a kind of a broad look of the proposed ALP, and kind of he can explain what's up here. Craig?
Thank you for the opportunity to present tonight. So I'll start kind of down in the lower left-hand corner. We call this the southwest quadrant of the airport. It's near the intersection of Palatine Road and Wolf Road. Currently, that area is home to a couple of the oldest hangars on the airport. So what we're proposing to show on the airport layout plan is a complete redevelopment of the southwest quadrant. Currently, there are a couple of general aviation small aircraft hangars located on the very southern extent of the airport. Those are being allowed to remain. The rest of the quadrant is being redeveloped. A portion of this is underneath the footprint of existing runway 624, which is proposed to be decommissioned as part of the study. So this is an opportunity to really kind of redevelop and reimagine what the land use in this portion of the airport will be. Let's see, going, I guess, down to the lower right-hand corner, you have we call this the southeast quadrant. This is near the intersection of Milwaukee Avenue and Palatine Road. I think a couple key components in this area include Hawthorne Aviation is planning a pretty significant expansion to their operation. We're allowing, they already have one hangar under development off of Tower Road, which is near the air traffic control tower off of Milwaukee Avenue. And then we're allowing space adjacent to their current facility along Milwaukee Avenue for some additional expansion. Additionally, in the southeast quadrant, we're proposing a large number of large aircraft hangars as part of the FAA approved forecast. Most of the growth that we saw at Chicago Executive Airport in the long term was in the large and medium jet segments, so some of the larger aircraft that fly in and out of the airport. And so we want to make sure that the airport has appropriate space to accommodate these aircraft if the opportunity arises for the airport to base one of these aircraft at their facility. So we have a large number. You can see they're kind of the orange boxes in the lower right-hand corner of the exhibit. Additionally, again, runway 624 is being removed in this quadrant as well. And some of the land is being reused for hangar development going forward. In the upper right-hand corner, we call this the northeast quadrant. Primarily, the focus here is the long-term acquisition of the industrial park that is located off of Sumac Road and Industrial Drive off of Milwaukee Avenue. This planning is consistent with planning that's been done over the years at Executive. I believe this area has been targeted for acquisition by Chicago Executive for decades. And so we're remaining consistent with that target. We understand that there are certain land uses up there that may be a little bit more difficult than others to acquire and relocate, but nonetheless, the airport has been tasked with maximizing its development envelope inside the 4 roadway boundaries. So we thought that taking a long-term look at the industrial park made sense. Additionally, there's some other smaller hangars developed along Milwaukee Avenue as well. And then lastly, in the very sort of northeast corner of the airport has existing T hangars for small aircraft there. We're also proposing an expansion to these facilities in the form of a new aircraft hangar, as well as a new aircraft parking apron that could be converted to hangar space down the road. And then lastly, just real quick, off of Wolf Road in the northwest corner of the airport, there is a couple of smaller hangars that are being proposed that we understand are already being moved forward with by Atlantic Aviation off of Milwaukee Avenue. So that's a general overview, kind of taking you from southwest around to northwest of the airport layout.
Thank you, Craig. Just a couple highlights of the ALP. Of course, we've heard a lot about the topic of decommissioning runway 624, and I just kind of wanted to hit some highlights of that topic there. Not too familiar with airports and aviation necessarily, but it's our shortest and narrowest runway at the airport. The decommissioning, there's actually 3 hotspots, and we'll kind of show you one here in a minute that's associated with this runway, so that it helps with those 3. It's used by about 2% of the flights at the airport, so the majority of flights use the other 2 runways. All the airplanes that use 624 can also use the main runway in 1230. No FAA funds for the 3rd runway, and I'll kind of explain that, and Craig, you could jump in. But we have a primary runway that's 1634. We have a crosswind runway that's 1230. And 624 is designated an additional runway at the airport. AIP handbook, that is the kind of the FAA guideline for everything that FAA funds. Did an update to their AIP handbook and considers additional runways at GA airports as not eligible for participation. So any improvements to that runway would be local only cost. We've got would have a total rehab planned in a few years at about estimated cost of about $1.5 million, and that would be total the responsibility of the airport, whereas the other runways and taxiways would be eligible for participation. So that's a pretty big burden on our limited capital budget. Also, locations for future operations and growth. I apologize, I updated this from the Wheeling presentation, but it says Wheeling, it should mean Prospect Heights. So it's kind of split down the middle. So future hangar growth is about 500,000 square feet in each community. And then future total development is about 1 million square feet in both communities. In that, we generate property taxes and aviation jobs, and we also have to reserve space for stormwater management in this plan as well. Okay, I just want to, this is a graphic kind of showing one of the hotspots that's in discussions here. And you can see, back when I was the assistant airport manager, I would purposely, when I was doing driver training of employees, which takes months to sign someone off on driving on the airport, I would purposely drive them or run this through this intersection because it's probably the most complex intersection on the airport. So kind of cleaning this up is one of the goals of the airport master plan going forward in the AOP. So you can kind of see in the graphic where there's kind of a bullseye of about 10 kind of intersecting. If you could think of an intersection in a road, and one of the most confusing intersections, we're really basically trying to clean those up, which is a ground safety issue. And runway incursions are kind of one of the reasons that we're trying to clean this up as well. Craig, do you want to say any more about the kind of the hotspot mitigation here?
So I think one of the things that we found in our analysis through the master plan is FAA gives an airport a number of different ways to what they call mitigate hotspots. They can be improvements that can be as simple as lighting, pavement marking, signage, just like you would on a roadway. And then they can range all the way up to pavement reconfiguration, closures of pavement, et cetera. The solutions really run the gamut there within sort of the aviation engineering and planning field. In this case, the airport chose to select an alternative to mitigate these hotspots to close a runway. And the reason for that is because the simple closure of this runway takes care of all 3 hotspots. There are other avenues to solve these, but nothing that kind of gives the airport the highest bang for their buck in terms of being able to mitigate all 3 hotspots at the same time, while also, as Jamie mentioned, reducing that potential rehabilitation cost from the airport books going forward. And so it was an opportunity to improve safety in one single step as opposed to going through numerous other steps to isolate each individual hotspot. So that was ultimately the reason that particular mitigation option was chosen versus other alternatives.
Thank you, Craig. I think that was a pretty good explanation. Some frequently asked questions about ALPs and hotspots and so forth. I just want to kind of run through these real quick. Does approval of the AOP guarantee that everything gets built? No, not necessarily. The AOP is a planning document, so anything moving forward from here is really met by safety and demand requirements. So just because it's on the LP doesn't mean it necessarily gets built or happens. It's really a plan for us. Is the decommissioning of runway 64 an unsafe decision? It's not. Addressing and mitigating FAA designated hotspots improves safety on the ground. Pilots ensure safe aircraft operations, and that's really the difference that we're talking about here. Does the airport close and demolish 64 immediately? No. There are prescribed procedures for closing a runway, including notifying FAA, going through an environmental review, and submitting projects for funding. So it's not a situation where the AOP is approved, and then tomorrow or next week we go out there with earth movers and take out the runway. It just doesn't happen that way. It'll take months, if not years, once a decision is made before the runway would be decommissioned. So it's not an immediate thing. How long have we discussed closing the runway? Well, it kind of started, the master plan process, we formed the SIG group back in November of 2018. The stakeholder involvement group was a large group of professionals, pilots, and so forth. We all got in a room. We sat with airport maps and transparencies, and that was back when we were kind of discussing maybe longer runways or different runway configurations and so forth. Basically giving everyone a clean slate to come up with what the future of the airport should look like. And it was during that meeting that the closure of 64 was discussed. So it sort of started there. Like I said before, it was presented at the July 11th open house at the Ramada. Again, we presented it at the September 18th joint meeting. I was invited to speak to the SEPA group directly at their annual meeting on the 27th of November, and we had a pretty good discussion at that meeting, so we've had some correspondence there. And then, of course, it's discussed at monthly board meetings, quarterly airport user meetings, and so forth. So there's been a lot of exposure to the decision to decommission the runway. Will closing 624 affect flight operations? In rare situations, it could. It may require light aircraft to adjust their flight plans or to possibly not even fly at all. However, because 98% of the flights currently use the other two runways, we anticipate very little disruption to the flight operations. And, sir, that's kind of the end of my presentation, but to kind of close here, there's been a lot of passion and emotion around the 624 closure discussion, and we appreciate that. But the comprehensive planning process is very prescribed, technical, thoughtful, all-encompassing, and frankly, it's our obligation to set the vision for the future. It also guarantees that not everybody will be happy. I hope that you've trusted the process and all of the dedicated time and professional work that has gone into the proposed ALP. Thank you very much. And Mayor, we could take questions now or later?
Well, let's start with me.
Sure.
1.5 million, you said something about 1.5 million. It would cost to take care of or continue the use of 64.
Well, we anticipate, just like all the other pavements, that's the life payment would come due in a few years.
Let me ask you, who's going to pay for that?
It would be our responsibility, so.
FAA won't help you?
No,
IDOT
sir.
won't help you?
No, sir.
And what do you have to do? Don't you have to raise the hangar rent to get the money?
We would have to make adjustments wherever we.
Right, financial adjustments.
Sure.
Good. The issue, Alderman Cameron, you had a request for a motion?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I wanted to make a motion to table item 12D.
For tabling forever, or what are we?
Just indefinite.
I was thinking maybe a couple meetings and then come back to it.
All right, but it can be indefinite. So-
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
I'd like just ask Alderman Cameron if we could, we're not at the vote yet, this is still in the discussion part, and while they're here, I don't want to shut down discussion on it, so can we finish at least the question portion, and then when we get to the item to vote on it further in the agenda, then you can make your motion then?
Just a point of clarification, since this is a presentation, and we haven't actually gotten to the resolution yet. There can still be a discussion about the presentation. If you wanted to have a separate discussion about the resolution, then you're correct. We'd probably wait till it's on the agenda, but because it's a discussion about the presentation that was given, that can still occur even if there's a motion to
Okay.
table the resolution.
Yeah, I just don't want to lose a chance to talk.
Right. So there's a motion pending.
All right, questions, Alderman Ludwigson?
Well, set.
What, do we have a motion? Do we have a second?
Is that what we're doing?
I believe so, yes.
All right, so, well, Alderman Cameron already made the motion.
Right, we need a second.
Second.
We have a second.
Okay.
See that?
Yep.
It's pretty easy.
There we go.
All right, roll call.
Oh,
Is that what we need?
wait a
Do you have any discussion on the motion to table?
Well, I think I would have heard him by now.
So I have a question. So I don't, this motion to table is not going to preempt or prohibit the people who are here today?
No, of course not.
It's not, they're all going to be able to
I
speak?
said they would be
Okay.
able to speak.
This is simply
Hopefully not all of them.
This is simply as it relates to the resolution approving the ALP.
All right.
So there is still a presentation that was made. The folks in the audience may still make public comment. It's just simply as it relates to the resolution approving the ALP.
Right. But
So just to-
questions in particular.
To clarify, it's being tabled for 4 weeks?
It's being tabled. There's no time limit on the tabling.
Oh, okay. All right.
All right, do we have questions for the gentlemen that are standing in front of you?
Mr. Mayor, if I may?
Yeah.
We have a motion.
I tried to do that.
I know, we can have a vote on the
Let's
pending motion, and then we can continue questions
All right,
regarding the
do we
presentation.
need a roll call for this?
No, just a voice vote.
A voice vote?
Yes.
All right, so the motion is to table
To table item 12D.
item 12B regarding airport layout plan. Voice vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say no. All right, we have full approval or full agreement. Now take me to the next step.
So if there's any questions regarding the
All right,
presentation.
there's a good idea. Motion, not a motion, a request for questions, starting with anyone that wants to start down on my left.
I have a question.
Yes,
Cameron.
ma'am.
The master plan, were we going to get a copy of that so we can see the updated version? Because I haven't seen it.
You should have a copy of the airport layout plan. If you don't,
I don't have that.
okay, yeah, we submitted that. We'll make sure you get it. The master plan itself will be wrapped up this spring or this summer. There will be a report following, but that's kind of a separate report.
Okay.
Is that right?
That's correct.
All right? Alderman Quinn?
I just had a,
Can I?
Oh, she's there.
I thought we were going in.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Well, I'm an odd guy.
Thank you, Mayor. Just, can you clarify once again the issues of the hotspot? And what I'm getting at is, looking at the current layout, it seemed to me that the hotspot tended to be an issue of intersecting taxiways as opposed to the runway itself. Now, I realize if you take out 624, you would take out the parallel taxiway as well. But is the hotspot the runway itself, or is it the multiple intersecting taxiways that are just to the north of that?
Sure. So FAA defines hotspots as areas of airfield geometry that are either historically or just based on their layout, potentials to cause runway incursions. You can't have a runway incursion without a runway. So hotspots are typically located at areas directly either at runways or directly adjacent to runways. So the concern here is that you have essentially all of that pavement, as is indicated on the left-hand graphic there, sort of converging at once. FAA uses the phrase of situational awareness, and that there can be what they call a loss of situational awareness, so you kind of forget about or you lose track of where you are, and the next thing you know, you're inside a runway environment, which can either be a problem in terms of a potential collision, but in general, that will cause a runway incursion. So while you are correct that the sort of the 5 pieces of taxiway pavement that are all coming together is a problem, it's the fact that it's located adjacent to a runway that is the issue. And To sort of further that point, if you look a little bit to the sort of the upper or sort of the middle left of the graphic, you'll see that the airport has another 5-way intersection like this. It's the intersection of Lima 3, Yankee, and Lima, sort of in the middle kind of west portion of the airport. That is not deemed a hotspot because there is a significant distance to the nearest runway environment, where in comparison to the one at hotspot number 1 that we focused on, it's directly adjacent to runway 64.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
Now Alderman Quinn.
That was kind of my same question about the hotspots.
Okay, hotspots are answered. Who's left? Anyone there? How about Wendy Morgan?
All right,
Alderman.
so I have a question. I understand that back in 2007, there was an issue regarding closing the runways, citing safety to the flying public, and the question is, if it was unsafe to close a runway in 2007, why is it okay now in 2020? So I need an answer to that.
Yeah, and we kind of went back and looked at the history of that, and we think it was tabled and not actually voted upon. And that process, I was brand new to the airport, so I'm kind of trying to remember myself, but it wasn't really associated with a master plan study or an ALP update. It was kind of a different situation involved with that recommended closure. That's one of the reasons you do a master plan, because it gives you time to actually study it the right way and come to these conclusions. And so we think we've done the homework. It's taken us 6 years. Sorry about that. But we think this is the smartest decision. You know, when you take a look at a master plan and an ALP, you have to look holistically at the airport and what's best for the airport. Yes, there are safety concerns and where there are ways to mitigate ground incursions and so forth. There's also other factors that we looked at when we were doing the master plan and the ALP update. Airport's the first piece of pavement to flood when the Des Plaines River comes up. There's a displaced threshold. That means because of the forest preserve trees in Milwaukee Avenue, landing on the 2-4 end, you lose about 1,000 feet. So there's that affecting the runway. There's a sort of a managing our resources best case for decommissioning the runway. It does open up future area for development on the southwest quadrant, on the east quadrant. So there's a whole laundry list of reasons that probably weren't present in 2007, but through this master planning process, we think this is a good decision for us as a whole.
I just wanted to follow up with something I understand came up in Wheeling about whether or not the FAA was asked whether closing the runway constituted a safety concern. And I guess my question is, was the FAA consulted about that issue, and what was their response?
So FAA has been part of the master plan process all along. Jamie indicated that at the stakeholder involvement group, there were numerous agencies that were represented. FAA was one of them, so they were witness to one of the initial discussions regarding the closure of runway 624. The airport has also met and corresponded with FAA along the way on this process. So FAA is the reviewing body of the airport layout plan. So if you all were to approve this airport layout plan here in Prospect Heights, the next step would be a submission of the airport layout plan to the Illinois Division of Aeronautics in Springfield and the FAA in Des Plaines. So the FAA will get an opportunity to review the airport layout plan with runway 624 closed. And so they will also get an opportunity to review the master plan documentation that we've essentially summarized here in the presentation. So FAA will not intervene, and they will not say you have to keep this open or you have to close this. What they will do is they will take a look at the airport layout plan, make sure the future airport layout plan meets their standards, make sure the airport layout plan was prepared according to their standards, and then they'll also make sure that the master plan was conducted in accordance with their standards. And one of those standards is the public involvement process, which we are very proud of, and we have followed their guidance. So while you're not going to be able to call up FAA and say, hey, can you weigh in on just 624? they will weigh in on the complete airport layout plan and the process by which it was developed.
So are you saying they won't weigh in on the issue of whether it's a safety issue or not?
Correct. In FAA's world, it is up to the airport to make the decision about what they want to do with their runways. FAA will not stand in the way of closing a runway should that be the airport's decision.
Thank you.
Alderman Ludwigson?
Was there ever any more runways than there currently are at Chicago Executive?
I think there may have been 5. I think one of the taxiways I know was a runway, so,
Was it
yeah, we had more than 3 at one point. And 2 of the biggest, kind of the busiest GA airports in the country, Teterboro, Van Nuys, they all have 2 runways. So it may seem like kind of a dramatic decision to close a runway, and there's a lot of passion behind it, but when it comes down to it, the busiest GA airports in the country have 2 runways.
I noticed in the plan too, when you look at the overview, when you show the development going, there's a couple spots that I wanted to ask about. It looks like on the southwest corner, are you assuming that on the southwest corner there at Wolf and Palatine, are you assuming that you're going to acquire that land there that is the gas station and the fire department and move them? Or just eliminate them? Because I don't see there being a boundary there anymore.
Yeah.
Or is it there?
That is considered a long-term development goal of the airport layout plan. It really comes down to the fact that, staying within those 4 roadway boundaries really constrains, sort of the amount of available real estate that's there for the airport. And so we understand that those can be some tough decisions, but it was our sort of charge from the airport to kind of maximize the development envelope within the constraints that were presented to us. So yes, to answer your question, the gas station and the firehouse are being shown as acquired by the airport in the long-term plan.
Okay. Because I know you're talking there about property tax and, the improvements, but we don't have one. So to us, it was a sales tax, which went away. So as far as I'm concerned, I know you guys show us the reports that show how many tens or hundreds of millions of dollars this generates, but doesn't seem to trickle into our budgets. So my concern is losing that property. I know that the sale of property is something that is at the control of the airport board, but the purchase of property is the community's, correct?
Back to the communities.
Is there, when you do an airport layout plan like this, do you discuss the process for doing acquisition in that plan, where you kind of set that out as part of the plan, or is that something you just assume will be worked out later?
Yeah, so this plan is really, it sets the sort of the long-term, what I would describe as aspirational development of the airport. For situations like the Southwest Quadrant, kind of typically airports develop sort of closest to the runway and then they kind of work their way back. So the 2 parcels that you're referring to are sort of on the very sort of outside of the development, and they would typically be sort of the longest term development items. The process for acquisition is a very standard prescribed FAA process, and it's my understanding per the IGA, as you mentioned, that the communities would have to weigh in on that decision as well.
Okay. And then if you were able to do something to, we hear that taking this runway away is going to make it unsafe. But I mean, you're always doing things to try to make the airport safer. I mean, I know that the safety has become the tool being used, or the method being used by the people that want to keep the runway as a reason. To me, I look at it more economical. You guys would have to spend money on this runway for 2% of its use. And to be frank, the private pilots at Chicago Executive always talk about how they buy their gas somewhere else. So it's always been, when we've discussed having a truck there to pump that gas, everybody brags about that they go other places to buy it. So, I mean, I understand that if you don't have to maintain it, it's going to save you money. I don't understand the safety issue. If you're unable to land a plane because the winds are gusting at 30 knots, don't land there. I mean, that's just as simple as that. So, don't go there. Fly up to Waukee and fly up to someplace else. So, it's not like it's an imminent danger. And when they say this, it's like you're going to catch them, and that minute every other airport's going to be closed, and this one, they won't have 624 anymore, and it's going to be dangerous. It's not. I just don't really. And you'll have your time, and but to me, it's purely financial. You guys, we require that you balance your budgets, pay for what your improvements, develop a plan that'll allow it to be sustainable. So it's hard for us to tell you to, yeah, we want you to do all that, but by the way, keep these things that might be a drag on the budget. So that's where I stand on it. So I agree with you. My issue though will be when you come to want to buy this property that is, anything that's got a cash register, because that's the only. I mean, Wheeling's losing industrial property that they're still going to be able to tax the leasehold improvement on anyway, which we can't, so it doesn't do us any good to even lose a gas station, so that's something we'll have to fight about later.
Sure.
But thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I, just thinking, money is important, safety is important, but I keep hearing this word safety. Where's the bad part? How many accidents have occurred near or on 624? I've been there for 35 years. I can't recall one. I recall jets landing in the river. I can recall a jet flying straight across into an industrial building across Palatine Road. I can recall a Stearman that flipped on the airport. Where's the safety issue? And everyone seemed to laugh when Alderman Ludwigson said, well, land somewhere else. Well, isn't the pilot in charge of the aircraft? You're going to find, and this is a prediction that I shouldn't even bring up, you're going to find that jet helicopter yesterday took a dive, and the tower called. Did you hear the tower call to him? The tower called and said, get up to 4,000 feet. He was in a cloud. The pilot screwed that up, not the runway or the tower or whatever it was. The pilot decides what to do. And if I overload my airplane, that's my problem. Towers isn't going to say anything. They don't know what's happening. So where's the safety issue? It has to rest with the pilot. It's really simple. Am I wrong? There's 50 pilots out there. They have Madeline Monaco. Are you still out there? She's the lady that taught me how to fly a very long time ago, but she's still a lot younger than I am. So, that's what she taught me. You're in charge of this aircraft. If I was sick or if I had a problem with my plane, and I told O'Hare I'm coming in, guess what? They let me come in because I'm in charge. And I said, that's where I have to land because that's the closest place. Now, I can't imagine if everybody here just has to go land at O'Hare. Don't do it. But if you need to, you're in charge of your aircraft. So if there's a safety issue, look to the people that are flying. All those accidents we've had, we were sued in one. Joe, I don't know if you were here. We were sued in one where the 4 people, I think, were killed taking off, going to northwest, and we were dismissed. Were you still around for that? No. It's 2 stewardesses, I think. Anyone remember that one? 2 stewardesses and a pilot and so on were killed because the guy took off in the wrong direction or whatever mistake he made. It was a pilot's fault. Pilot error is probably 90% of the issue in an accident. So where's the safety issue here? I don't get it. I love 624. I took off on it and landed on it hundreds of times. But the point of the story is I do have another short runway. I have a long runway. And here's a situation that we have to do what's best for the airport's future. And that's pretty simple. Somebody said, well, we have 2/3 of the airplanes parked on. 2/3 of what? Single engine airplanes? When I first got to the airport, I had a Citabria. there were 320 aircraft, piston-driven aircraft on the airport. What is there today? I bet it's less than 90. You know,
100 or so.
what's that? All right, so that's more than I anticipated, but there's no 322. Not that that's bad or good. It's just that we have to take care of that airport in the best way we know how. And that's why these guys here I appointed, because I know that they will do their best. That's Mr. Jim and my best friend Kearns, Bill Kearns. Why? Why? Because they have common sense. They listen. Here's the expert. I was there when he was hired. And why did, I was a part of 3 people that interviewed and brought him in, because we thought this guy knows what he's doing. You know what? He's been there, how long have you been there now?
To be 15 years.
15 years. He knows what he's doing, believe me, he does. He's very conscious about safety, very conscious about people, very conscious about doing the right thing. And he has to work, anybody here ever work with the FAA? I don't recommend it. No. And IRS is another one. Today I met with the bank people from the government. I don't like those kind of people. So I don't know what I'm saying, but the point I'm trying to make is that if this is what's best for the airport, and as you point out, it isn't going to happen tomorrow, it isn't going to happen the day after tomorrow, it's in the airport layout plan.
Sure.
You know, I can land at 800 feet, so you can put me in anywhere, or take off at 800 feet and land at 900. So I'm not at issue with anything. Land on your front lawn. So I'm concerned about the safety. I don't see any safety problems, because the safety problems are really up to the pilot. I worry about some of the pilots that fly around, and it happens all the time, drinking or whatever. But I don't worry about people that are in charge that know what they're doing, a council that is really, conscious of safety, of anything else you bring up. So we're not the bad guys, and, when I hear sarcastic comments, I don't even listen to them, because I think that's a waste of time. You didn't say anything about the group, and I didn't expect you to. So thank you for being here.
Yes, sir.
We have a motion on the floor. What does that mean?
We already, we tabled the resolution, so
All
it'll
right.
be brought up at another meeting.
So you're tabled. How's that feel? You're tabled.
I'll get under the table, Mayor.
And you didn't bring dinner either.
Yeah, she's back here. Jennifer's here. She's doing a great job.
Oh, Jen, you are here. Hi. Anyway, thanks for coming. I think it's a great plan. It'll be worked out one way or another. There's a solution to every problem. And if there's a problem here, we'll all get together and figure out the solution, including the people that are sitting here.
Thank you.
All right?
Thank you.
Thank you. Joe, where are we? What's the next issue?
Public comment.
Public comments. All right, let's get back to public comments. And it's about agenda matters. So if it's not about the airport, then talk about anything else that's on the agenda. You've got 5 minutes. Please don't be repetitive and have 10 people say the same thing. That's all I ask. Who would like to, we have slips here. All right. And
Most
you're
of them are
welcome
airport, but
to cancel your appearance if it was already covered. What do you have?
it doesn't say what their agenda is.
Doesn't say, okay. I presume most of these comments will be about the airport. Roger Faden. Is it Rogers? There's 2 of you?
Yeah, at least.
Roger, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Identify yourself.
Mayor
where you live.
Hellman and Alderman, and thank you for your support in getting a little more time to consider this. What I want to talk about is...
Could you please identify yourself?
Oh, my name is Rogers Faden. I'm with
And where do you live?
Executive Airport Pilots Association.
All right. So the topic is is Pilots Association. Okay,
Yep.
go.
Okay. So Executive Airport has 3 runways. You can see them here. 1634, 1230, and the runway in question, 624. And as you can see, these two kind of point in the same direction. And when you go to land or when you go to take off, you typically have a choice of runways. It's very frequent that more than one runway will be acceptable. So when you're landing, the wind is the main consideration, and 96% of the time, this is the runway that's used. Now, they'd have you believe that 624 is just a little orphan with 2% of the traffic, but this runway also gets 2% of the traffic. The runway of choice for departures is influenced a little differently because it might be where you are on the airport that would make you choose a different runway because it's closer and you don't want to taxi to the far runway. Why is 624 important? This runway is the only runway that's oriented east and west. The other two are basically north and south. So when you get a strong east-west wind, that may be the only or the safest runway for small aircraft to land on. Larger aircraft can land with a higher crosswind, and the large jets, they can handle, the FAA says, over 30 knots of crosswind. Small aircraft, 10 knots. So they have a choice, and 93% of the time, this runway is sufficient for the larger aircraft. The FAA says, do a wind study, and if you can't get at least 95% coverage, you need another runway. Well, these two runways that they would like to keep provide only 93% coverage. And that other percentage, the small aircraft can only land on this. So it's not just a matter of safety, it's a matter of can you use the airport at all. I'd like to talk about why the airport wants to close the runway. And I'm going to talk about some of their arguments. Hotspots is one of them, and Red is going to talk to you about hotspots, but basically it's a problem with taxiway configurations, not runways. And you can fix the hotspot, as he will show you, by reconfiguring the runway. Closing the runway reduces the safety margin for small aircraft. The second reason they wanted to close the runway is for money. Federal and state improvement funds, and the maintenance of 624 is ineligible. Well, that's not exactly true. The Airport Improvement Plan handbook that was referenced by now says there are 3 kinds of runways. The main runway, 1634, that's covered. Then there's the crosswind runway. And they have claimed that 1230 is their crosswind runway, and that's why it's getting funded. But in fact, it doesn't meet the FAA standards for 95%. If you combine these 2 runways, it's only 93% coverage. If you define as it should be, 624 is the crosswind runway along with 1634, then you get 98% coverage. So they can get funding by declaring 624 as the crosswind runway and 1230 as a secondary runway. The third reason, and they don't really want to talk about it, is that they want the space that 624 occupies for development. And I don't have the chart up there, but if you look at the layout plan that they've given you, you'll see that all those orange spots are proposed runways. And those orange spots, hangars, sorry, those orange spots don't require the closing of 624 to get sufficient amount for development. So according to the projection methods they use, the current aircraft on the runway would require 2.25 million square feet of hangar space Yet currently, there's only 800,000, close to 900,000 by their count. So they've overestimated this by 2.5 times. And if you factor that in, we have more than enough room to develop. So last month when we were here, there was somebody pitching a development project for apartment buildings, and you guys asked a lot of questions, and they didn't come up with the right answers. And you sent them back to redo the plan to meet your specs. Today, they presented another development plan, and I suggest you do the same thing. Send it back, have them do it with 2.4 included for safety reasons, and then everybody will be happy. We're not angry with them. We're quite happy with the airport. It's just runway 624 that's our issue.
All right, thank you. I have a request from Lou Wapatnik. He is a legend in my mind. I know he's been flying a lot longer and doing a lot of good things. Lou, identify yourself.
Huh?
Identify yourself for the cameras.
Oh, I thought you already did, but that's okay. Lou Wapatnik, a legend in his mind. And I live at 233 Wheeling Road, which is right on the border of Prospect Heights and Wheeling. It's in the Lake House plus house development. This is my 63rd year at Palwaukee Airport, or I call it Palwaukee because I was raised on it basically, being there 63 years. But I started flying in May of 1957 at Sally's Flying School. During the course of my flying career, I was selected as the 1966 Flight Instructor of the Year for the United States. In the year 2016, I was inducted in the Illinois Aviation Hall of Fame. So I've been around for a while. I've got over 16,000 hours of small plane flying. And I have a lot of experience, mostly at Chicago Executive Airport. My students and I have used runway 624 hundreds of times, and with the prevailing southwest winds. It has been well known that the Airport Commission over the years has been mostly interested in high-end business and corporate aviation, and that the little guys in general aviation don't add much to the overall income of the airport. However, through the various community relations that the small aircraft flight schools, Civil Air Patrol, Air Scouts, Young Eagle flights, etc., bring to the surrounding public population, the value is incalculable. By closing runway 624, it only hampers the use of small single and multi-engine airplanes. By closing 624, it only hampers the small multi-engine airplanes. I'm repeating myself. With the hazards due to crosswinds. Now, crosswinds seems to be a very big thing in this. And most general aviation airplanes have a crosswind limit of 15 knots, 15 to 17 knots to be exact. Okay, if you take runway 16, which is the primary runway being used, and 24, and you have a wind of over 20 knots, which is generally prevailing winds, 25 gusting to 30 sometimes, even up to 40. We've had these recently. You'll find out that exceeds the crosswind limitation of the airplane. Well, what does that mean? That means that if a pilot or a student lands on a runway that is not a crosswind runway, and they violate that crosswind and have an accident, even if it's a minor accident, they're subject to a Federal Aviation Regulation 91.3 that says they're careless and reckless. So there really is not a crosswind runway if you eliminate 624. Due to corporate traffic, I generally fly to other airports because it gets kind of busy out there with students, and I mainly just fly with students. So if you have corporate airplanes, we generally go to another airport. The gentleman over here said, yeah, we don't buy our gas, but I take exception to that. I'm with the, the Leading Edge Flying Club. Our flight school buys all its aviation gasoline from Signature, so you get the price of the aircraft flowage. Yes, there are some other people that go to other airports, that's true. But still, our school, which does a lot of flying, generates a lot of aviation fuel for the communities. So basically, that's it. There's one other thing that hasn't come up very much tonight, and that is noise. Now, I know there's a big noise situation around Wheeling and Prospect Heights, because I live in that area. I don't mind the noise, obviously, but many people do, and I understand that. By having 624 in operation, and if you could trim down the trees with and a forest preserve, that's not always easy, they're behind schedule on that. But if they could eliminate that, or bring down, or trim the trees down, we'd have much more runway to be utilized. It would be a lot safer and a lot less noise to be complained about by the citizens around the area. That's what I have to say. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Look, quick question. Runway in Schaumburg.
Yes.
How many runways are there?
One runway.
How many runways are there at LaGuardia?
I've never been to LaGuardia.
2.
Okay.
Going the same direction.
Many years ago, to answer
No, I
your
don't
question
know.
about
Let
Schaumburg.
me finish and get you off the podium here.
No, you bring that up. It's a good point. But many years ago, when they closed Campbell Airport, not Campbell, Chicagoland Airport, I was flying out of Chicagoland. I was instructing there at that time. And what happened, they decided to close that down, as you know.
Right.
Okay. So the guy, the school I was with decided to move to Schaumburg. I flew there one day. And because the crosswinds were so bad, I said, I'm not going back, and I never did. Now, I have landed there since. I have a lot more experience. I can handle crosswinds a lot more than other people, but even still, it's not safe to be there.
It is an east-west runway.
It is an east-west runway.
One runway. Where's the 95% for that airport from the FAA?
They still utilize it, and it's fine if you. Schaumburg has a lot of other problems. They have a low traffic pattern. They have a 1,600-foot traffic pattern because of O'Hara's traffic.
Right.
So they're very limited. But when they can't fly, when the situation is very crosswind.
All right, thank you.
Okay, one last thing regarding that. When it comes to my students, we go to other airports that have east-west runways, Campbell,
Grays Lake,
et cetera, okay? That's fine. The problem is there, when we come back, we still have to come back, if the winds are southwest, we have to land on 2-4. And if we exceed our crosswind components, then it's wise or safer to go to another airport, okay? So that's why if 624 is gone, the flight schools are really going to be hurt, and the executive airport's going to be hurt because students and other flight schools are going to be going to other areas. And transits inbound to Chicago Executive, if they have a bad situation and can't use 624, they're going to go to other airports and you're going to lose future business.
Right.
Not only fuel, but
Thank
hotels.
you. Got your point. Thank you. Arthur, is it Gunn or Jim? Gunn?
Yes.
You only have half a you here.
Good evening, Alderman and Mr. Mayor. I'd like to thank...
Your address?
Huh?
Where do you live?
I live in Northbrook. I'm a former resident of Quincy Park.
What's your address?
I'm a former resident of Quincy Park when Darlene was the...
All right. What's your current address?
My current address is 1967 Kaling Road.
Not 111?
No, that's, I asked the clerk if I could put down what address, and they said, I could put down the airport. That's where my...
All right, how can we help you?
Okay. I'd like to thank Alderman Pat. I'm sorry I can't pronounce your last name. But thank you for at least allowing us to speak, because I think this has to be an open forum. I'm a forensic and fraud examiner. I'm a CPA. That's how I deal with the IRS. I used to also work at the Federal Reserve. So I know dealing with government agencies. So I want to ask a lot of questions. I want to take a different approach. I want to ask a lot of questions. Why do substantially all the airports within a 100-mile radius have east-west runways? It's interesting. I was told there's like 93. All but 2 have east-west runways. Mayor Helmer, you brought up Schaumburg. Perfect example, one runway east-west. Lake in the Hills, one runway east-west. They all have east-west. But guess what? O'Hare has 7 east-west or relatively situated northeast-southwest runways. But you know what? There's a hotspot at O'Hare, Hotspot 1, which is right by 22 right, 4 left. I don't hear anybody screaming that they have to tear out that runway to deal with it, the hotspot. So let's talk about it. Mayor Helmer, you're absolutely right. Pilots have the ultimate responsibility. However, let's say you have a passenger. You know, we talked about tonight Kobe Bryant. But you know what? Kobe Bryant's daughter was on that helicopter. And God bless their souls, but I will tell you, sometimes passengers, you're a licensed pilot, I trust you. Well, you know what? I would hate my daughter to be on an airplane with a pilot that makes a wrong decision. I'm sure a lot of you wouldn't want your children or grandchildren to be on a plane with a pilot that makes a wrong decision. It's scary. So let's talk about this. I'm going to ask a lot of questions because I'm a
2
product.
minutes and 30 seconds.
Thank you, sir.
Please rattle.
Okay, I'm going to rattle them off. We've requested FOIA requests regarding hotspots. We got it back. They didn't talk to anybody, the FAA. They gave us standard publications. Second of all, they talked to stakeholders. Well, you know what? I met with Executive Director Abbott on July 3rd. He never mentioned that they were talking about getting rid of 624 in the ALP. Why? I've got that question. Why? There's a lot of facts that frankly have not been answered, okay? We've offered to work with them, to give them information, our wind studies. You know what? They've ignored us. They are ignoring their major stakeholder for general aviation, Piston. Why? They don't want to hear about it. They want to go along their way and, I hate to say it, bamboozle people, okay?
Are you talking about our people here?
I'm talking about people that don't want to talk to us.
All right, well, let's reserve your
Okay.
sarcastic comments.
Jim Krieger, who is the former tower chief of O'Hare, 33 years. He's a subject matter expert. He's a deputy air traffic manager at TRACON. He's an FAA group manager for U.S. Runway Safety, chairman of the Airport Construction Advisory Council. You got a copy of his letter. He does not want 624, okay? Why are they saying that 624 is dangerous? It's not. You reconfigure the taxiways and you will be fine, okay? We followed guidelines. But let me just put something in the last 45 seconds. There are pilots here that contribute to the local economy. And I'll tell you, I am treasurer of 3 major organizations. I've advocated for executive, for programs that bring in 500 people, programs that bring in 50 people plus in all these airplanes that would support the Prospect Heights and Wheeling economies. Guess what? That's not going to happen. I've been rebuffed because of the attitudes of the airport folks. They don't like small piston aircraft. So why should I go out and get busted for trying to promote the airport and promote the local economies and businesses when they're not willing to listen to us or at least help? So the airport board wants to build hangars. Right now, Signature, I know, is giving up 2 hangars because of the taxes. As far as my airplane goes, I actually buy, and my partner behind me can attest, we actually buy most of our fuel at Signature, trying to support the local vendors. And I really want you to consider that. By having the small folks go away and no new folks coming in, the local economies, the local businesses, the local people, Mayor Helmer, that elect you folks, will be hurt. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrew Warrington.
Yes, sir. Good evening. I bear these people no malice. We have never met. My name's Andrew Warrington. How do you do?
Where do you reside?
I reside 82 South Lake Street, Grays Lake. And I'm an instrument-rated private pilot. and have a degree in mechanical engineering, and have studied some of the facts. And I was going to make 3 points, but in the interest that you expressed of brevity, I'm going to reduce it to just one. And I'm going to use the example that you gave us, Mayor. And so I did research the claim that has been made that runway 246 is detrimental to safety. And thankfully, there are only 2 accidents in the NTSB database for PWK. Neither of them are related to runway 246, but one is the accident that you pointed out, Mr. Mayor. And it's related to a strong crosswind, interestingly, on the primary runway 34. So this was the accident on October the 30th, 1996. That's correct. A Gulfstream jet was departing Palwaukee when, according to the NTSB, it collided with terrain following a loss of control during takeoff ground roll on runway 34 in gusty crosswind conditions. It struck a ditch and became airborne. The fuel tank exploded and the 4 occupants were unfortunately killed. The NTSB's probable cause included the remark that the pilot in command failed to maintain directional control of the airplane in a gusty crosswind. And although that's related to a jet, which would not be able to take advantage of runway 246, unless, of course, we improved it, this accident provides a tragic illustration of the safety risks of operating even very capable aircraft with professional pilots in strong gusty crosswind conditions. So why take the risk if there's an alternative? The Aviation Safety Reporting System is a voluntary system used by pilots and air traffic controllers to report incidents that could have been serious accidents. PWK features in 183 reports from 2002 to 2019, and 28, 15%, mention runway 246. Only one is a taxiway hotspot issue, which contradicts the comments that have been made about this being a problem, drawing the attention of the FAA. As an aside, as we pointed out, the proposed redesign of the taxiway intersection is simpler and better. We like that. However, it doesn't require the removal of the runway. One report in that 183 refers to a pilot who landed on runway 24 after, 24, after being vectored by the tower for 16 in winds gusting from the west for 40 knots. And I wonder why there's only 2% of people using it, because it seems like that would be a good move. So thank you very much for allowing us the time to talk. It's much appreciated, and for deferring the decision on this report, because we think there's a lot of discussion to be had. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Rhett Dennerlein? I got that right?
That's correct, Rhett Dennerlein. And I am a tenant at the airport. I'm a commercial pilot. I'm a member of the U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary. I'm an aircraft commander, and I fly patrol missions out of the airport. I'm also an aeronautical engineer, and I've represented, as an attorney, clients including Boeing and Learjet, Beechcraft, Pratt & Whitney, et cetera, on FAA regulations and so forth. So the topic I want to talk about, and I'll try and be brief, I will, is about this hotspot stuff. The hotspot is depicted on this FAA data airport diagram as this area right here, and it is only the taxiways. It's this 5-way intersection here in the gray area. The runways are all black, and here's runway 24. And what I want to point out is that the presentation that the airport gave. This is their presentation we put here on this slide, and I think I emailed you a copy of this last week. And I annotated this to put on the hotspot here in the black circle. The airport, I don't understand why, their engineers show this hotspot as this big red circle, including the runways. It does not. It does not include the runways. The hotspot only includes this 5-way taxi intersection. Same thing with the diagram over here, where they do the after. Now, you may ask yourself, let's go back to this section. I'm going to try and be brief. Why are they removing runway 24? Why are they decommissioning the runway? They say it's for safety for the hotspot. It clearly is not, because the hotspot is up here. The runway is down here. The hotspot is the taxiway intersection. They're removing the runway so they can put in these jet hangars, which I annotated on the diagram here. It's for land. It's not to fix the hotspot, plain and simple. Now, we looked at the airport master plan. This is from 2017. This is an excerpt from it. And they talk about this hotspot, which I circled here on their own diagram. And they admit that the issue here is taxiway geometry. This is back in 2017. And they admit that it has to comply with this FAA concept of a 3-node intersection, which has to do with taxiways. What's the real reason? Did they say then what the real reason was for taking out a runway? They did. It's in their 2017 report. They say a runway could be decommissioned for more efficient land utilization. This whole discussion about hotspots, hotspot number 1, which they showed you up there, has nothing to do with runway decommissioning. It's reconfiguring the taxiways. And if you look at the airport layout plan, and we have a depiction here of the airport layout plan, and we annotated it to show the hotspot 1. We show the runway placed back in, and they reconfigure the taxiways. Here's the red where they remove pavement of a taxiway. They remove pavement over here of the taxiway. Then they add in a perpendicular taxiway and another perpendicular taxiway. That changes this 5-way intersection to a 3-way intersection, which complies with FAA standards. That solves the hotspot. So why are they removing the runway? Why? It's apparent when you look at the layout plan, it's for these large jet hangars. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's the reason. And, you know, this issue about, I understand, if you're a pilot, you gotta land. There's 2 ways to land, safely or in a crash. And if you're if you're in the air, and I'll tell you what, using this airport for 32 years and flying patrols for the Coast Guard, and I have friends who fly mercy missions for patients or organ donors and so forth, small piston planes, we volunteer. This runway is a lifesaver. It's saved my life, at least once. Coming back, when I had to land, the winds were at 32 knots, gusting to 40. That was the only runway I could land on. And Lord help us, if you take out a safety feature for reasons that aren't transparent, for reasons that they make up, and tell you that something is when it isn't. So I ask you to help us by listening to us. Let us explain why, if you take out the runway, you don't meet the 95%. Let's explain this issue of the hotspot. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Madeline Monaco, certainly a legend in my mind. You're a former alderman here, too.
That's what I was going to start with. I'm Madeline Monaco. I now live in a multifamily dwelling out in Lake Barrington, but I used to be here in Quincy Park. I sat in the Ward 5 chair. I sat on the Airport Commission. And I do not have an acrimonious relationship with the airport staff. Jamie and I are cordial, professional, and might I say friendly? Yes.
That's the way it should be.
We have a good relationship, and we discuss things when we have the opportunity to do so. I'm on a different tack tonight, and I'm walking a narrow walkway here. When I first came to the City Council in Prospect Heights, Mayor Gilgan had been a huge proponent of buying the airport. The City of Prospect Heights wanted to acquire the airport. The City of Wheeling conducted a referendum and said, "Nah, we don't want that airport." But then when it became clear that Prospect Heights was going to buy it, Mayor Schultz said, we're going to have to be part of this, or we're going to be cut out of the decision-making. So it's always been kind of unequal. My conversation tonight is about economic impact. The airport is owned by these two municipalities with different needs, goals, and population numbers. That dichotomy has always required a balance in order to keep the airport a vital and effective part of the national airspace system. The master plan seems to show a rather serious difference in future benefit. The plan shows development areas for Wheeling-owned land north of the motel and runway 24 is the previous dividing line for Wheeling. And in fact, there is already a plan approved for a gas station on Milwaukee Avenue where Corbus Car Sales now sits, Milwaukee and Sumac. From information I heard at a recent Village of Wheeling directors meeting, the directors have been promised more tax revenue producing development all along Milwaukee Avenue. They are not inclined to give up the Wheeling-owned land inside Milwaukee Avenue, which puzzles me in light of the fact that they sold a very large piece of land inside those boundaries to the Korean church on Hintz Road. And that doesn't produce any tax revenue, it's a church. The plan also shows removal of the Ramada Hotel property, the 1098 building, and all of the businesses on the Palatine Frontage Road from west of McDonald's all the way west. That's all your revenue producing. And I say you, I sometimes say mine too, because I have ties here. So there's a lot of lost tax revenue for Prospect Heights. Jim McLennan has got a big hangar behind the motel in the 1098 building, and he says, I am mind-boggled that they would give up those two pieces of property which are extremely lucrative. Perhaps not the 1098 building and the motel, but the actual land they sit on is extremely valuable, and the airport layout plan wants to make that dry retention. No revenue, no buildings. You're going to lose car rental operation, the library, 2 car repair businesses, Freeze, is it Freeze or Fry's? Paul Fry's, all of them. The Milwaukee Avenue properties to be removed show the use to be a retention area. I said that already. The cost of additional noise protection, cost of new customs building, cost of new airport management building, all are non-revenue producing. The remainder of the added development area is for large corporate box hangars, and the plan proposes removal of the airport's outside storage tie-downs, which are used by at least 3 flight schools. Those businesses continue to operate to provide replacement pilots for the severe shortage in commercial aviation, expected to continue for at least another 10 years. The flaw in the airport's plan to add new corporate hangars is that there are already many empty inside storage areas on the airport today, and the current FBOs can give up those leases at any lease renewal point. If empty space exists, why are the directors proposing more, all while eliminating other revenue-producing existing businesses? Oh, one more page. I'm sorry, I tried very hard to make 5 minutes, but I talk a lot. I would be happy to share this document with you if you wanted to look at it, make copies. There isn't too much more. Thank you very much for letting me speak.
Could we have the one you have in your hand?
You may.
All right, give it to our clerk, please.
Order in their page numbers.
I'll bring a copy back to you. Oh, you're good?
Thank you
Okay,
very
thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Michael Baraz, please. Michael,
Good evening.
there you are.
Hi, I'm Mike Barras, and I'm on the Chicago Executive Pilot Association Board. And I'd like to just put some context around this. A lot of words mean different things to different people, but pictures do tend to bring things home. If you gentlemen could put the slides up on the projector that I brought in for us today. It's gonna,
He's got a presentation. You want his presentation up? Mr. Mayor?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Just want to make sure.
Sorry. Brief is the key word.
All right, I'll skip the pros and cons because we've pretty much heard most of the argument today. But I did want to bring to illustrative perspective how the actual winds that we're talking about do affect this runway 624. Could you put that back up, please? So I was just at a seminar over the weekend, and a professor of meteorology, Rick DeMaio, you also may have seen him on TV. He's been on TV many years. He has formerly been United Airlines meteorologist, forecaster, helps the FAA and the airlines determine the traffic flow at O'Hare and other airports in Denver and so on. He brought in some very interesting views of the wind. So if we look here, this is going to go month by month, and I'll go through them very quickly, but you can see very quickly the pattern. So we see mostly east-west winds in January, and we see in...
Battery's probably going down.
See, now if we got that revenue from the airport, we'd have new laptops.
We're going to get there. We're going to get there.
All right, you're rolling.
Okay.
Oh, no, the clock's rolling, though.
All right, so in February, you see even stronger winds that are aligning more toward the west, less so much on the southeast. March, again, we're seeing a very dispersed pattern. April, now we're seeing crosswind for 3-0, for 3-4, and then we get to May, it's along the same lines. But now we start getting into the summer months, and we have a very, very strong preference for the southwest and northeast runways. And we see it again in July, we see it again in August. Getting back into the other months, we're seeing a little more moderation. But again, you know, it's very much an east-west pattern with northwest and southwest components to it. So it's really not arguable that these kinds of winds won't determine which runways are going to be used as a matter of preference. Now, you could say, well, just don't land, and that's perfectly viable. I mean, anyone would just stay in the air as long as necessary until the winds change, or they can just go somewhere else. If they do go somewhere else...
Put it on the taxiway.
Sure, put it on the taxiway. That works. I was just reading about that. That's a federal regulation violation right there that pretty much is the NTSB.
If it meant my life, I'd do it.
Anyway, the point being that if you do that once, if you go divert to another airport once, and then you have to do it a second time and a third time, yeah, you're probably going to figure out there's a pattern here. I shouldn't be at this airport, which kind of gets us back to the viability of the airport. Now, we all want PWK to be a viable airport. We all want it to be a very successful economic driver of jobs, of economies in general for Prospect Heights, for Wheeling, for all of us who use this airport. It's a very valuable asset. But at the same time, balancing things like safety and cost is critical. So if we're going to say, well, we don't need it for, you know, we can manage safety by just not using it, by not flying those days that we would need that runway, well, that's also okay. And if we get back to PWK and we do need to land, and we do have some urgency in choosing which airport, our car's there, our expectations are to land there, yes, it's a possibility to divert, but on the other hand, people set up safety systems because we don't always make the sanest decisions in the moment of various stressors, of various psychological factors. Basically, the human factors are going to make us do things that are not always in the most rational hindsight approach to doing it. Along the same lines, if we look at the approach to the decision of landing, we could also say, well, we shouldn't land if we're going to run long on a runway. So we don't really need to spend any money on the EMASs, the overrun areas. We should just eliminate them. We could save a huge amount of money. We could eliminate a lot of things which we buy with the safety intention. We should eliminate seat belts in cars, just don't have accidents. We could eliminate a whole lot of factors of normal everyday life if we don't care about building in the safety margins. But it is about this runway as the safety margin for a a segment of the traffic that goes into Chicago Exec. Now, that segment is arguable, and in fact, we are looking at this plan. Plans follow objectives. We need to look at the objectives of what is the plan trying to do. If the plan is truly trying to decide which segment we're going to focus the attention on, it is clear that the objective is to cater to the larger aircraft who do produce a lot more fuel flowage, a lot more revenues on various things like catering and other services. So perhaps it is that we're just not interested in having general aviation, smaller aircraft at PWK. We should just be honest about that. Thanks.
All right, thank you. I'm really starting to hear the same things over and over again, but Rob, Mark. You're done, okay. Who else do we have? You could try to come back. I have the chief of police, sir. Yes, sir.
Some of the statements that were made that just are not in keeping with any of the statistical data that we have proof of. And, you know, their facts tend to be thrown out when there's nobody there to refute them.
Well,
Opinions.
We've experienced that.
Yeah, we've experienced that.
You're being sarcastic, and I'd ask you to leave if you keep doing that. So why not Jamie? I mean, he's running.
Jamie and or Craig would be great if they would have the opportunity to speak.
All right, let's give them limited time though, okay? Jamie? Stop the grumbling or you will go home.
I hope I took some good notes here.
You're lucky I can't see you.
Okay,
Go.
any obvious?
Okay, just a couple general points. With regard to the crosswind issue, I think the crosswind issue is defined by FAA maybe a little bit different in terms of master planning than I think has been discussed previously. The component of crosswind that's being referred to is not necessarily an FAA requirement that there has to be a direct perpendicular runway to the primary runway. So in the case of runway 1634, which generally runs north-south, the comments that have been made previously indicate that there's a requirement that there is a 90-degree perpendicular to that defines the crosswind. In the way that FAA interprets a master plan, they're looking for 95% of composite wind coverage, sort of all 360 degrees. They're not necessarily concerned about what the various orientations are at an airport to get you to that threshold. So the data that was presented in the master plan essentially indicates that runway 1230 and runway 1634 provide that 95% threshold, despite the fact that they are not situated and oriented perpendicular to each other. So I think that's an important distinction to make, is that you can have 95% without the traditional X runway orientation. So in the way that we look at it as master planners on an airport like this, is we're looking for that 95% threshold, which you do have with the two runways that we're proposing to be left. Let's see, in terms of the overall sort of eligibility of runway 624 for federal funding, unfortunately, the airport has historical precedent on its side. Back in 2011, runway 624 was rehabilitated 100% local. FAA made a determination in 2010 that that runway was not eligible for federal funds, and so the airport used local funds to rehabilitate that runway. Additionally, runway 1230 has been designated by FAA as essentially their crosswind runway, and FAA has provided 90% federal funding for 2 rehabilitations on that in 2006 and then just last year in 2018. So the sort of the hierarchy at Chicago Executive in terms of the runways has already been set and acted upon by FAA. So those were I guess, a couple of the main points that I wanted to mention sort of in closing here.
Yeah, and Craig, you're really good at some of the technical points. I mean, this is your career. You've done master plans before, you've done ALPs before, so that's why we hired a reputable team to do this for us, is because that is what they do for a living. And so thank you for doing that. I just want to kind of refute some of the, some more subjective and emotional things. You know, I tell my husband that the military's taken away my emotions a long time ago, so I really don't have any to hurt. So, but it does kind of hit me a little bit when we talk about we don't care about safety or we don't care about the GA community. And that's just not true. My crews are very proud of what they do, maintaining the airport. When we go and do snow ops and my crew is out there for hours and hours and hours, we don't care if it's a Cessna 172 landing on that runway or if it's a Gulfstream 650 landing on that runway. So to say that we just don't care about safety or the GA community and we just want the GA community to go away, that's just not true. We don't show T-hangers going away. We don't show a tie-down area going away on this ALP. We value all of our tenants, and it's just a shame to hear that they don't think that we value them as well. So I just kind of want to get that in there because I'm proud of my staff's job. I'm proud of CMT and the work that they've done on this. So I just wanted to make sure I said that.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Enjoy your evening, what's left. All right, Joe, where do we, what's next?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Is anybody here for Lola's? Okay, could we have them go?
Sure.
I know they're not next, but can they go next? They've been here for a long time for something that's, because you are here, I'm going to vote in favor of.
All right,
So
let's
it's,
do that. What's the, are they on the agenda?
Yes.
All right, well, Joe, let's call them up for the agenda.
Okay, this is item 11B. It's second reading of the ordinance providing for a different liquor license for Lola's, increasing the number of C licenses, that's a full-service license, from 2 to 3, and decreasing the number of C1 beer and wine.
Yeah, she
by
explained to me that they're on Rand Road now, so they expect much more traffic than they got in the shopping center. So I think I have no problem with it. We have to vote on that, or what?
Yes, second reading.
Okay, this is a second reading for what Joe just outlined. Can I have a motion to approve, please?
So moved.
Second.
We have a move and a second. Any further discussion?
Yep, quick comment. I know it's, we still have these 3 o'clock licenses. I know you don't plan on staying open that late. They took the one they had to. Unless, do you guys plan on staying open till 3? So it kind of goes to, nobody's ever said they did every time we give out a 3 o'clock license. I don't know why we continue to do it, but because you've been here and your mom's done a good, your mom has done a good job, and I trust she's going to do a good job, I'm going to vote in favor of it, even though I normally would push you to take it 12 o'clock. So I'm not going to fight that, and because you guys have been a good business in town. So good luck.
All right, we have a motion to approve. Can we take a roll call, please?
Yes. Alderman Morgan Adams.
Aye.
Alderman Cameron.
Aye.
Alderman Quinn.
Aye.
Alderman Ludvixson.
Aye.
Alderman Dolick.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you for waiting.
For information, do you have an opening date?
Coming up.
29th?
Come on
Okay.
up, introduce
Good.
yourself, promote
Yeah,
your business,
absolutely.
please. You guys are working hard over there.
I'm Jimmy Barton.
I'm Katie Barton.
We own, well, our whole family owns Lola's Pizza. And yeah, we're trying to open for food, just food, the 29th, and then the bar should be open midway through February. And yeah, we're super excited.
Good, so are we.
All the best.
Thank you.
We also have, the school district is here for item 11A.
Let's get them up here.
That's, so we have second reading of the Staff memo and resolution authorizing the city of Prospect Heights to conduct a tax increment financing feasibility study. This is solely a feasibility study for the former Jolly Funhouse Academy property, 1001 Oak, and this is second reading. This enables staff to solicit requests for proposals for a consultant to come in and evaluate the eligibility of this TIF, to look at boundaries, to look at a schedule balance sheet of revenues and expenditures. And as I've mentioned before, we are trying to do this as surgically as possible.
And who's going to hire that person?
We would have a staff committee of evaluation, interviews, requests for proposals, and then we would bring a recommendation to the council for a
Okay,
vote.
so then we find and have a person who pays for that process.
It would be paid for by the city with eligibility to be paid for back from.
Out of the TIF.
Out of the TIF, yes.
All right. Anybody have questions on that? Well, let's have a motion to approve first. It's the second reading.
So moved.
All right, we have a motion. Do we need a second?
Second.
Okay. Discussion. Anyone want to talk about it?
Yes, Joe, just a quick question. Can you do this in conjunction with, obviously, we'd want to use the same group that Lexington is, right? Because why are two people going to do a study on a TIF?
Yeah.
You know, they need one too. Would it make sense for us to do it together? Or have them get an alternate price for us to do it? Could we do that purchasing wise?
There may be a different interest. We may be better, I think, somebody that's not trying to work for both parties. At some point, there's a joint interest, but then I believe that at some point, there's also a separate interest too. So it would be my recommendation maybe to go elsewhere from their advisor.
But wouldn't the TIF boundary be one? Or would they, I mean, we're not gonna, I would think that we would need to encompass the actual development area in order to take advantage of the TIF, so we'd have overlaying TIFs instead of conjoining TIFs. So would we be able to,
Joe,
you know what I'm saying? The value of the TIF is the property that's being developed, not the homes that would be extended to.
All right, we have Mr. Attorney.
Thank you, Mayor. So this is the proposed TIF in this ordinance is the proposal made by Lexington. Doesn't extend beyond into the neighborhoods that were being discussed. It's really that what was shown in their proposal presented to the council is the TIF boundary that's being identified in this ordinance as eligible or is being sought for a feasibility study. And what, to Joe's point, the city may have a different, the consultant working for the developer may have a different interest in promoting eligibility or other aspects of the TIF that benefit the developer rather than necessarily the city.
We will evaluate. Obviously, we know that the property 1001 Oak, the former Jolly Funhouse Academy, that obviously is the area. We've had discussion previously with Lexington that they may do something with a park district, expand into purchase some property from them. So it would be likely that Muir Park would be part of it. The part that gets, I think, will be the harder part for evaluation, where we need somebody with knowledge, experience, is, as we discussed, utilizing the TIF to address some of the stormwater issues in the neighborhood. When I say surgically, what I would ask the consultant to evaluate, the possibility that we could do that with the streets or with easements and not touch properties. I don't know if that to be true. That's where we need some professional assistance. But as far as my understanding is, there's TIF laws this thick. There might be an area where we could press, if that area of storm water management, storm sewers, also benefits that area, then I think it might be within a half mile. But that's a question that we have to ask them.
Right, but if our TIFs are conjoining if we don't have the same TIF area, we're not gonna be able to get the increment we need to do what we wanna do. I mean, there's leftover increment
Yeah.
just in their area,
Yeah.
there will be.
Right.
So it's gotta be one TIF, otherwise, what we're doing is of no benefit.
Yes.
But, and I thought that Lexington was paying for the TIF, we weren't paying for it, correct? I mean, we did that resolution approving the
inducement resolution?
Inducement resolution, so.
That was a different resolution. That declares costs from a certain point eligible for reimbursement of a TIF. And for example, this is complicated, we've already expended legal money on it, and we will do more. So things like that, it declares that eligible for TIF assistance.
But as I understood it, when I grilled them pretty hard, they were upfronting the money that they'd get reimbursed from if the TIF happens. So are we now paying for the TIF study out of our own pocket? So that's not how I understood it from the call. I thought that they were doing this, and, they kept talking about having skin in the game, that they would be doing that and taking that risk.
Yeah, that was my understanding as well. And maybe I was unclear at the time, but that was my understanding as well.
If I may, so they can submit a TIF feasibility study to the city, and the city can accept it. The city is just required to prepare or to conduct a feasibility study. They would be eligible, as the city would be, for reimbursement of any costs associated with the establishment of the TIF from future TIF revenues. But if the city went out and solicited its own experts, the city would be paying for that upfront with future reimbursement unless some separate agreement was reached with Lexington outside the bounds of this ordinance and that inducement ordinance stating that they would pay the cost, at least the cost of our independent TIF study.
Now you muddied it even more, is we're gonna do our study, which they might not, if we have competing interests and we do a study, we can't ask them to pay for it, we'd have to hope that the TIF goes through and get our money back. My thought that the inducement ordinance was inducing, trying to entice them to do this, so that they expend the money and take the risk that this happens. I mean, if you're talking, if this study is $3,000, okay, but it's not. I mean, it's going to be an expensive.
That is the purpose of the inducement. It's that from that moment that the ordinance was passed, that any expense that would be considered TIF eligible would be reimbursable from TIF funds, should a TIF be established. If a TIF isn't established, then they're responsible for fronting those costs on their own. But the city, likewise, the city independently did some TIF work or solicited this feasibility study on its own, that under the law, the city would be able to be reimbursed for that from TIF revenues, just like the developer would be. Now, we don't have an agreement with the developer at this point that says any of these costs that we expend are reimbursable from you, regardless of whether or not the TIF is in place. That's not in place right now. If you want that in place, that's a separate conversation that we have to have with them. Otherwise, we can utilize a TIF study that they prepare, that their consultant prepares, and use that as a feasibility study that they've paid for, and that we're
Outside of just what could be generated in the TIF, what competing interests would we have? I mean, all they care about is they get their money that they've outlined in their proposal. Right?
Well, one area where there might be competing interests is we'd also ask, by state law, there's eligibility, and that's one area of scrutiny. Another area of scrutiny is what is considered the but-for test. But for this level of public assistance, would this development occur? Many costs are eligible. It's a wide range of costs. I would trust that being under the city's consultant more than under the developer's consultant.
Is it out of line for us to I don't know what we're enticing them to do that, because if we give them this inducement agreement, a resolution to induce them to allow us to do the TIF study, spend the money up front legally with the fees and that, go out and get bond opinion letters and try and sell bonds on this thing.
No, no bonds.
No bonds?
Yeah, no, this is a pay-as-you-go TIF.
So they're only gonna get paid through increment, so there is no cash out of this thing for 5, 6, 7 years. Because there's not even gonna be pins made for that period of time. There's no money there now to get an increment from. I mean, that's completely taxed,
Well,
untaxed.
the timing is important. The phasing of it, actually, when the adoption of the TIF ordinance, we would delay that as much as possible to capture as much increment as possible.
Because I think, now that you're saying that, I mean, this is a big, you're talking, we could spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on this, not knowing we're gonna get the TIF in place.
I thought that this is just a feasibility study we're talking about,
Right.
which is a, what, 15, 20,000?
Yeah, this is probably about.
Yeah, but just because you get that done, if this is a pay-as-you-go, we're not gonna see any money for a long time. So anything else that comes out of that we would have to pay for legal fees, bond, I mean, okay, there's no bond opinion letter, I get that, so we're not selling bonds, but why wouldn't you? Now that comes up, why wouldn't you want to do bonds if your TIF is approved in order to not be out of pocket on it?
Well, bonds to me is more of a speculative TIF. This is a TIF for a finite development of approximately 74 housing units. If we time this correctly to minimize, basically to maximize the increment. So there's a lot of work before the ordinance declaring the TIF, and this is part of it. When we go to declare this property a TIF, would be also in conjunction with the approval of the development. That way, when they come in here for a PUD or whatever development approval there is, you do that simultaneously, so you don't have that several-year wait. That you approve the development, and maybe you also have within the agreement benchmarks that so much is done within a year, 2 years. Probably, Dan, I think we are looking at maybe a 3-year completion.
The Lexington Homes was targeting at 60 units to be 2.5 years, at the highest at 88. They were looking at 3.5 to almost 4.
So probably within the development agreement, you also have those benchmarks. The trick to this, and it's going to take more work than I'm able to answer tonight, but the trick to it is to make it.
I want you to talk about this.
Oh, I'm sorry. I love television.
Oh, yeah.
It's changed our lives. So the trick is to make this as simultaneously as possible, so that you don't lose any of the increment, or the opportunity for the 23-year increment.
Right, but we have a lot of skin in this game.
Well, you have some legal work, a little bit of engineering work.
Some staff, a little bit of staff time.
Which we work anytime. I mean, it's not like there's additional cost to that.
Anytime Lexington interest rates jump to 6%, and now they can't get 300,000 or 500, whatever they want to get for their units, we're holding the bag. So I don't.
Excuse me, Alderman Livingston. Because we're not bonding it, we're not obligating this to the GO.
But the TIF bonds are never obligated
Well,
to the GO.
they're not bonding it. They're financing this money. That was the whole.
Right, but I mean, realistically, I mean, if like Wendy said, it's a $10,000 or $15,000 study, we're 100,000 into this before any increment starts to come in, easy. And if something happens, I guess I just completely misunderstood the inducement resolution.
I think this is a minor point. I mean, the study is not a lot of money. I mean, we're not putting ourselves at risk for hundreds of thousands of dollars here.
They don't get paid until they create some wealth. So it's
Nor do we. So,
Well,
I mean, Bill.
Well, we have
attested to this.
alternatives.
We were here when that last TIF, in the middle of when that started, we were here after that started and had to clean up the mess from
That
it.
was a totally different situation.
It's always a totally.
No, this was that was a totally different situation.
So-
This is a minor, amount that we have to, we're talking about protecting our own interests. We do have different interests than Lexington in many respects.
No, we all want to get paid.
Okay, but we do have different interests, and I think we do need an independent feasibility study. My question was whether that feasibility study can also incorporate, I think you said, Joe, you said it can incorporate that other area, so we can get it all in one study. And I think that's going to best protect us and give us the best information.
And that's part of it too. I doubt we're going to be able to address those stormwater issues absent this TIF. I just don't see it.
I agree, I don't disagree with needing the TIF, that we're better off doing it and all this. I agree with you 100%, but I didn't realize that we're on the hook for everything.
Well,
How are we not? If Lexington, that inducement agreement we have with them does not say they have to build this project.
I don't see what your big concern is. I mean, this is a feasibility.
You're a lawyer, you should know.
I understand that, but I don't see why you're so paranoid
Joe,
about it.
if I may have a solution here. So this is just authorizing a feasibility study. We are not under contract. We haven't selected a vendor. What we can do, we're gonna have to come back, and the council's gonna have to approve an actual vendor to conduct the study. If the boundaries of the proposed TIF change, we'll have to, note that as well in the ordinance. In the interim, what we can do is reach out to Lexington and see if they would be willing to compensate or reimburse the city for the TIF study. And that way we can have an agreement in place before we actually execute an agreement with a vendor, or if they refuse, then you'll understand that they refuse, and that can influence how you.
What I would like to see too is a budget. I'd like to see somebody put together, and probably because you are doing TIFs often with other municipalities, you know what costs are going to be involved with where we're at now to where we get to granting them their entitlements to build the project. Between now and then, what we're going to spend, and then realistically, if we use that 3.5 years, when we see the first dollar. Because, I don't even know, are we putting this in the budget for next year? Is this a line item? Is that?
That's what we'd have to do.
And so if this is a second reading, if you want to.
No, I'm okay with getting the price for it. I know that's all we're doing.
Right.
We're not authorizing the spending of it, but.
No.
Okay.
This would be authorized in the city, or it's a requirement that a feasibility study be conducted, and this would authorize the city to at least solicit consultants to prepare the report. And once that process is concluded, they would have to come back, the city has to come back and get approval for that contract. And in the interim, we can prepare the budget that you've asked for city expenses, I assume you're looking for. You don't really care about Lexington.
Nope.
And also reach out to Lexington to see if they'd be willing to reimburse the city for the study cost.
Or front the cost.
Front the cost, right.
Front the cost.
And take the risk. That's what I thought they were doing all along.
My understanding was, I thought they said they would consider that.
They would consider the enlarged TIF.
Well, but they would consider fronting the cost for some of these things, so they said they would. But we can ask them again.
Then we'll be okay.
We'll ask. We will ask. I would ask you to really take a hard consideration about the issue of their consultant versus the city's consultant.
No, I'm fine with that. It was just the outlay of money, and this being a pay-as-you-go TIF versus a bonded TIF. Everybody's got to understand that we've got obligations.
The other side of it, that they don't get paid unless they perform. So there's also an incentive for them too, so it's.
Right.
All right, we have a plan. The plan is to go ahead with talking to people and maybe coming up with a consultant that will do this work. In the meantime, we're going to talk to Lexington and say, that's not what we understood, and I agree with Alderman Dolick and Alderman Quinn and so on. What they said was very clear to me. They said, this will not cost you anything. But they also said you will be fully reimbursed from the TIF. So that, doesn't ring good. I agree with Alderman Ludwigson. So let's just go, get some bids in, see what it's all about. And in the meantime, let's nail down the agreement we'd like to have with Lexington on this issue. Take it from there. I'm
Very
sure
good.
I'm sure you can get Nate back in, explain the concern, and we'll go from there.
So we need a motion then to,
We already have a motion and a second, so
okay.
it's a
We just have
roll
to
call.
vote.
Yep.
Roll
Okay.
call to interview potential TIF people. All right, so let's have a roll call.
Alderman Cameron.
Aye.
Alderman Quinn.
Aye.
Alderman Morgan Adams.
Aye.
Alderman Dolick.
Aye.
Alderman Ludwigson.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
There we go.
Council is back in session at, feels like 10 to midnight, but it's only 10 to 10. All right, where were we, Joe?
We're at new business, and the city attorney can address it.
Actually, I believe we're on consent
Or
agenda.
consent, okay.
10A. And I can speak to this. This is, if you recall the last meeting, Mr. Ducharme brought to the city's attention 3 settlements that Azavar had solicited from various utilities related to fees that were owed to the city. One of which, the Comcast agreement, was a proposed settlement was tendered to the city, and this is a resolution authorizing a settlement and release with Comcast for approximately $16,000 worth of franchise fees. If you have any questions, direct them to myself or Mr. Ducharme.
This still goes forward, or next month they'll owe us again something and so on?
It's, this is for all fees owed past.
Yeah.
It's not, not moving
So
forward.
is there monthly payments coming in then in the future? Or?
There should be, right.
Yeah,
There should be.
well, let's ask for that.
Yes, no, there will be.
Okay. The Sherman man is down the trail there. Bites him in the leg and doesn't let go.
So I make a motion to approve this resolution.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second, further discussion, and being none, roll call, please.
I got a question, Cameron, down here. Is there any,
I remember you.
there's no dates on here, like where, the settlement, is there supposed to be like a date from, up till?
Let me find
Like
it
what,
for you.
that they owe us this money, but what date range are we talking, that they owe us this? September 30th.
It's through September 30th, 2019, in the agreement.
From when?
It's all fees that they owed to the city up through
Yeah.
September 30th, 2019.
So we're talking like 17 and 18 up till it's September, or?
I don't have the exact dates in front of me, but they're going back as far as they can feasibly go back, as long as we were under Comcast's agreement to collect those back franchise fees.
So should that date be in the, in here? or-
It's,
I'm not a lawyer, but I'm just, shouldn't, date.
It's in the
range be
agreement.
here?
It says up through, all fees owed up through.
to September 30th, 2019.
So as far back as there are fees that are owed through September 30th, that is the period of time. Which is what Asbar found.
Calculated based on the addresses that had been missed in the past.
It's in the letter. It's in the letter. Thank you.
All right, where were we?
Big
Roll call.
Roll call.
Alderman Cameron.
Aye.
Alderman Ludwigson. Alderman Dolick.
Aye.
Alderman Quinn.
Aye.
And Alderman Morgan Adams.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Did you have something?
Yes, if I may,
Yeah, go
Mr.
ahead.
Mayor. So the only remaining items under new business, there's, first I'd like to request a waiver for first reading for ordinance 02003, which is staff memo, an ordinance amending Title 10, Chapter 1, vehicle licenses.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Further questions, comments? Take a roll call vote, please. Or can we do these,
This is a voice vote.
voice vote? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? There being none, move on.
Following up on that, I'd like to entertain an omnibus motion approving items 12B, which is ordinance O-2003, which is a second reading of the vehicle license ordinance, as well as item 12E, which is a resolution approving a waiver to Milwaukee Road and Sanders Road corridor agreement. Item 12C was withdrawn as unnecessary by Dan Peterson, and item 12D, which is the airport layout plan approval resolution, was previously tabled. So this would be an omnibus motion for items 12B and 12E.
And voice vote?
That would be a roll call.
Roll call, please.
We need a motion and a second.
So move.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second, and we will have a roll call.
Alderman Cameron.
Aye.
Alderman Ludwigson.
Aye.
Alderman Dolick.
Aye.
Alderman Quinn.
Aye.
Alderman Morgan Adams.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. We're back to Joe.
We have items for the next workshop meeting in February.
Well, let's have that item 9, we haven't done that. Right?
Oh,
Yes.
official report, okay,
Staff and
sure,
elected.
staff report.
All right, staff and elected officials report. We'll start with the chief of police. Chief, are you here?
I'm still here.
All right.
Like a while ago
I
since I
thought you
spoke.
fell asleep over there.
No, I'm still here.
What do you have?
I just have one thing, or two things, actually. One thing is this reference, we gave the awards out a while ago to our police volunteers, and we get those from our Police Citizens Academy, which we hold every year. We're going to be planning on having another Citizens Academy, probably starting up in April. So if anybody's interested, they can contact the station, and that's how we recruit our volunteers, is through our Citizen Academy. And then also today, I was speaking with Alderman Quinn about a program we had she wasn't aware of. It's a program we've had for quite a while, and we're going to probably start promoting a little more. We have it's a telephone reassurance program. It's basically a check for well-being program, specifically for anybody, but it's usually the elderly. If they're living alone, they have any family in the area, we have a program. It's kind of like a house watch thing. They fill out a form, and usually on Fridays, one of our volunteers, which happens to be Cindy, who was here, she comes in on every Friday afternoon, and she calls the person to see how they're doing. This past Friday, she called on an individual that she spoke with probably for the last couple of years. Every Friday, he wasn't responding, wasn't calling back. We sent an officer to the house, and he was deceased in his house. So the program did work. If it hadn't been for that, who knows how long he would have been there.
Wow.
Took us quite a while to find next of kin. But Kathy, I gave her the form. She's going to put it out in the Rob Roy area, and hopefully we can get some more other people that are alone and can benefit from the program. So that's all I have.
All right, thank you, Alderman Cameron.
I don't have anything, Mayor.
Alderman Quinn.
Okay, I do. One, the first thing I want to say is that I just want to remind everyone that today is the 75th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. So it's International Holocaust Remembrance Day, and I think it's really important for us to think about that. The other thing, I do want to thank the chief and his staff for this program. I think it's incredible, and we're going to get the word out about that. And then I would like to ask the mayor and Joe, Scott Britton was critical in us getting a grant for the sidewalk in my ward, and I was wondering if we could do a presentation, here at one of our upcoming meetings, just to thank him for that, and so that we could let people know that, our representatives do listen to us and do work. So that's something I just want to throw out there.
Peter, would you take a note on that? Because I'm fried and Joe's tired. Seriously, we like doing that kind of thing, so.
We'll work on that.
Thank you. That's
All right,
it.
Alderman Dolick?
I have no report, sir, thank you.
See, the seats were switched, Alderman Dolick, that's why.
I thought it was intentional. You were just skipping over me tonight, but
I would not
that's quite
forget
all right,
you.
sir.
Alderman Wendy Morgan.
Just wanted to mention that myself and City Clerk Joanna Precious-Nook also attended the Northwest Municipal Conference Legislative Committee brunch on Saturday, and it was very informative. We three main topics of discussion were pension reform, infrastructure investment, local government revenue. We had many congressional delegates there, state senators and state reps, and it was very interesting and informative, and and we really enjoyed it.
All right, you went around, shook
Also-
a lot of hands,
Yes.
met a lot of people. That's the purpose of these, going to these
Yes.
things.
And then also on January 16th, I attended and Mayor Hummer was present also, and many other people from the library board, the park district, the school boards, and other community members at the Complete Census Committee, and our block party is on April 18th, and I believe that there's a lot of good information coming out soon regarding those issues and the census.
All right,
Okay.
thank you. Alderman Ludwigson?
No report.
Dan, are you down there?
Yes, I am, sir. Thank you. Big announcement, our newest restaurant opened to the public for breakfast. Bread and Butter Cafe at the Prospect Crossing Shopping Center, hours 6 a.m. to 3. Had their soft opening late last week and opened up to the public last week. So they take the spot that was vacated by Lola's, who's expanding their business, so we pick up a new restaurant in town. So that was really good. Also, too, just to let everyone know that residents are starting to get their keys for Building 16 at River Trails and starting to move in. So that's the first of the newly constructed buildings at River Trails. So good news there. Thank you very much.
All right, who's next?
No report, Mr. Mayor.
All right, Mark, are you?
Yes, sir. No report this evening in matter of timeliness. I'll have one
I
in
get
2 weeks.
more reports from the people about you than you say about yourself. Remember the really important thing. It's not what you say about yourself, it's what people say about you. And I gotta tell you, the snow thing, which probably, the rain was more in favor of what you did or what you got done, but people really came up to me in church, especially, and talk about bread and butter. I was there for after church yesterday, and with Gail, and I had two people come over and say, "Hey, you guys really do a good job on the road." I said, "Yeah, thank you. It's all the things that I do."
It starts at the top. Absolutely. Oh, so
wow. I'll have to remember that.
Wow. You command good forces, sir.
Who is your biggest fan? It's me.
Absolutely.
Don't worry. I don't take credit. I don't like
the crew has been working hard with the different weather we've had come in. It's been odd. December was great. We didn't have much activity. The guys didn't have a lot of overtime. They spent time with their family around the holidays. January has turned into a different story. We've had a lot of time spent salting, plowing the roads. We're hoping the season starts wrapping itself up pretty soon.
I saw on my block, I saw the belly plow.
Yes, sir. We're working out great this year.
Not a lot of snow to worry about, but that's going to be a heck of a tool in a bad storm. How many of those do you have?
We have four.
Four.
All four of our big trucks have the underbody
Yeah.
plow scrapers, and it gives the drivers a lot of ability to, when they cut the corners, they're still clearing the corner. They don't have to go back and clean it with a front plow.
Right.
So the productivity of it is easier, but it can't handle a 6-inch snow.
Okay.
Not like the front plow. So
All right.
thank you, sir.
I told everybody you're a very humble man. So I take the credit, so that's. All right, where are we? Yes, Joanna.
Okay.
Forgot the J.
I'm going to reiterate the census, that it's April 18th on a Saturday. It's a block party at Willow Trails Park. That's off of Apple Drive, that's the east side of town. There will be local food vendors, music, and attendees can fill out the census there. More info will follow in e-news, the city website, social media, and quarterly newsletter. I want to underline that this is the year of the census. It's so important that everyone gets counted, because this is where we get a chance to get the federal funds for the state. And just to be a little funny, and it'd be easy to remember, this is the year of the rat due to the Chinese calendar. So instead of saying we want to get a piece of the pie, we want to chase the cheese. We want to get a hunk of that cheese, okay?
I like that.
Follow the cheese. And then we have breaking news during the 2 to 5 minute break that we had. I opened the letter, and this is really great news. Cook County is going to have a new program administered by the Cook County Board of Review. They are telling us that Cook County residents are now eligible to apply for the surviving spouse tax abatement. The Cook County Board of Commissions and the Chicago City Council have passed ordinance to authorize a property tax abatement in their jurisdictions for the surviving spouses of Cook County's fallen heroes. The program serves surviving spouses of a fallen police officer, soldier, or rescue worker. This program will recognize and honor the ongoing impact of this sacrifice on these families. So the program can abate up to 100% of a surviving spouse's Cook County and City of Chicago property tax liability. The Cook County Board of Review will administer the program, and the surviving spouses apply for the abatement with us, they say. The Board of Review will consider applications and supporting evidence, hold a hearing if needed, and recommended qualifying applicants for final approval. If approved and admitted to the program, the surviving spouse may reaffirm the facts remain the same and continue in the program yearly. So I will find out about these applications, and I will get more info about it and remind everyone about it.
Great, thank you. Did I miss anybody, or is there an additional thing? Yes, sir.
Very quickly.
Yes.
The December financial report was on the agenda.
It is.
Just last meeting, we went through the 7-month budget review. Really, nothing has changed. If we could approve the report, we'll get it posted out on the website, and it'll be available for anybody who wants to look at it.
All right, you'd like it approved now?
The 7th month or the December report?
The December report is the one we're approving tonight.
Okay.
It was on the agenda, we just...
All right, so we need...
Motion to approve.
So moved.
Second?
We have a motion, we have a second. Any additional comments? Take a roll call, please.
Alderman Morgan Adams.
Aye.
Alderman Cameron.
Aye.
Alderman Quinn.
Aye.
Alderman Ludwigson.
Aye.
And Alderman Dolick.
Motion passes 5-0. Joe, are we back to you?
Yes, sir. We're back to, well, we can go to warrants.
We can go home, too.
Yes, sir.
I have an 8 o'clock flight.
Oh, my.
Approval of warrants. That total came out to $302,963.76. Wire payments, the January 17th payroll posting was $168,236.66. The January 17th police pension funding was $67,894.84, which brings the total warrant amount to $539,095.26.
Motion to approve as presented.
So moved.
Second?
We have a motion, we have a second. Any questions? Roll call, please.
Alderman Cameron.
Aye.
Alderman Quinn.
Aye.
Alderman Morgan Adams.
Aye.
Alderman Dolick.
Aye.
Alderman Ludwigson.
Aye.
Are we done, Joe? Can we go for
Let's see, we have no public comments, non-agenda matters, no executive session, which brings us to adjournment, Mr. Mayor.
Motion to adjourn. Jeez, sorry.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you for coming.
Go to